They called it destiny when the Alpha King chose his queen. They called it glory when he placed the crown on her head. But Maera Lorne, nameless, powerless, invisible, felt something else entirely. The suffocating grip of poison coursing through a bond no one knew existed. While the kingdom celebrated, she stood frozen in the crowd, one hand pressed to her belly, where life had already begun to grow. His wolf screamed inside her mind, his will shattered, and she knew, if she stayed, they'd kill them both. So she ran. Into the wilderness, into nothing, pregnant, alone, and carrying a secret that would burn kingdoms to ash. If you want to know how a forgotten healer became the storm that shattered a throne, stay until the end. Drop a like, tell us what city you're watching from, and let's begin. The grand hall of the Silver Crescent Palace smelled like winter roses and lies. Maera stood 3 rows deep in the sea of bodies, wedged between a merchant's daughter who wouldn't stop giggling and a guard who reeked of ale. She shouldn't have been there at all. Low-born healers didn't get invitations to royal ceremonies, but her mentor, Old Nan, had shoved a borrowed cloak into her hands that morning and said, "Go, you need to see this." Maera hadn't understood then, she did now. The Alpha King stood on the raised dais at the far end of the hall, backlit by candles that made his dark hair gleam like polished obsidian. Darian Voss, 28 years old, undefeated in battle, cold as frozen steel in court, and hers. Not that anyone knew, not that it mattered anymore. "Behold," the High Elder intoned, his voice echoing off marble columns, "the woman chosen by fate and the gods to stand beside our king, Lady Seraphine of House Valtor." The crowd erupted. Applause rolled like thunder. Maera's hands stayed limp at her sides. Seraphine glided forward in a gown the color of moonlight, her golden hair braided with diamonds, her smile serene and practiced. Beautiful. Titled. Everything a queen should be, everything Maera wasn't. The bond flared hot in Maera's chest, sharp, sudden, wrong. It wasn't the gentle warmth she'd felt for weeks, the secret pull that had drawn her and Darian together in stolen moments when no one was watching. This was different. This was pain. She pressed a hand to her ribs, fighting to breathe. Darian's wolf was screaming. No one else could hear it. The bond was hidden, unspoken, unclaimed in any official capacity. They'd been careful. Too careful, maybe. He'd wanted to wait until after the winter campaigns to make it public, to avoid the scandal of a king choosing a nobody. She'd agreed because she loved him, because she trusted him, because she thought they had time. They didn't. Darian took Seraphine's hand. His movements were smooth, controlled, perfect, empty. Maera's vision blurred. She could feel him through the bond. Not his thoughts, but his essence. And it was wrong, muted, like someone had wrapped his soul in wool and shoved it into a box. "By the ancient rites," the High Elder continued, lifting a silver circlet, "I bind this union. Let no force sever what the gods have joined." Lies. The word screamed through Maera's mind, though she didn't know where it came from. She'd never been particularly devout. Never cared much for ceremonies or prophecies or fate. But something in her bones knew this was wrong. Darian placed the circlet on Seraphine's head. The crowd roared, and the bond snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Like a rope pulled too tight, fraying, splitting, but not severing. It whipped back into Maera's chest with enough force to steal her breath, and she doubled over, gasping. The merchant's daughter glanced at her. "You all right?" "Fine," Maera choked out. "Just need air." She shoved through the crowd, ignoring the muttered complaints, the sharp elbows. Her vision swam. Her pulse hammered in her ears. By the time she stumbled into the corridor outside the hall, her legs were shaking so badly she had to brace herself against the wall. Pregnant. She'd known for 2 weeks. Had planned to tell him after the ceremony, after the politics settled, after nothing. Because he'd just chosen someone else. Footsteps echoed behind her. Maera straightened, wiping her eyes, expecting some nosy courtier. Instead, it was Commander Lael, Darian's second in command, a mountain of a man with scars across his knuckles and eyes that missed nothing. He stopped a few paces away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Maera's jaw tightened. "I'm leaving." Good. He didn't move, just watched her with that steady, unsettling gaze. You felt it, Lael said. Not a question. Mayra froze. I don't know what you're… Don't. His voice was low, edged with something that might have been anger or grief. I've known Darian since we were boys. I know when something's wrong with him, and I know you've been slipping into his private chambers for the past 2 months. Heat flooded Mayra's face. It's not… I don't care what it is. Lael stepped closer, lowering his voice. But I saw his face when he took her hand. I saw his eyes. That wasn't him. Then why… I don't know. Frustration cracked through his composure. But if you're smart, you'll disappear, tonight. Because whatever just happened in there, someone made sure it happened. And they won't want loose ends. Mayra's throat tightened. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save your life. He turned and walked away, boots echoing on stone, leaving Mayra alone in the cold corridor with a bond that refused to die, and a child she couldn't explain. She went back to the healer's quarters, packed what little she owned into a canvas sack, herbs, bandages, a spare dress, the silver pendant Darian had given her 3 weeks ago, tucked inside a hollow tree during a ride they'd pretended was routine patrol. Old Nan found her as she was tying the sack closed. So you're running. Mayra didn't look up. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when staying means dying. Mayra slung the sack over her shoulder, finally meeting Nan's eyes. The old woman's face was lined with 70 years of hard living, but her gaze was sharp as ever. You think they'll let you go? Nan asked. I think they don't know I exist. Yet. Mayra swallowed. I can't stay. Nan studied her for a long moment, then sighed and shuffled to the corner of the room. She returned with a small leather pouch, pressing it into Mayra's hands. Gold marks, Nan said. Enough to get you far from here, maybe to the border territories, maybe farther. Nan, I can't. You can. You will. The old woman's voice turned fierce. And you'll survive, girl, because that's what we do. We survive. Mayra's eyes burned. She wanted to argue, to explain about the bond, about the baby, about the wrongness she'd felt. But words failed. So she just hugged Nan, tight, desperate, and whispered, Thank you. Then she left. The wilderness beyond the capital was unforgiving. Mayra had grown up in the outer villages, knew how to forage, how to read the sky for weather, how to move quietly through underbrush. But knowing and doing were different things when you were alone, pregnant, and running on 2 hours of sleep. She pushed north, avoiding main roads, sticking to game trails and stream beds. The bond pulsed in her chest, faint now, muted by distance, but still there, still alive, still his. 3 days out, she started bleeding. Not much, just enough to scare her. She stopped in a cave, boiled water from a nearby creek, drank the herbs Nan had packed. Feverfew, raspberry leaf, things to calm the body, to hold on to what wanted to slip away. It worked. Barely. On the 5th day, she reached a village called Greystone. It wasn't on any map she'd seen, just a cluster of wooden houses huddled around a frozen river. The people were suspicious. Outsiders didn't come here without reason. Mayra lied. Said she was a widow, fleeing debt collectors. Said her husband had been a soldier, killed in the border skirmishes. Said she just needed work, a place to sleep. The blacksmith's wife believed her. Or maybe she just needed help with her 5 children and didn't care. Mayra settled into a corner of their barn, trading healing work for food and shelter. She delivered babies, set broken bones, treated frostbite and fever. And slowly, carefully, she disappeared. No one asked about her past. No one looked at her twice. She was invisible again. Safe. Or so she thought. 2 months passed. Her belly began to show. She told the blacksmith's wife it was her late husband's child, due in summer. The woman clucked sympathetically and gave her extra portions at dinner. The bond stayed quiet, distant. But it didn't fade. Sometimes, late at night, Mayra would press her hand to her chest and reach for it, just to feel him, just to know he was still alive. She never got more than a flicker, a heartbeat, a sense of movement. It was enough, until it wasn't. She woke one night to the bond roaring. Not pain, not fear, just intensity, like someone had set a fire inside her ribs. Mayra gasped, clutching her chest, and through the bond she felt him, running, hunting, moving fast, coming closer. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She scrambled out of her bedroll, pulled on her cloak, and slipped out of the barn. The village was silent, blanketed in snow. Moonlight turned everything silver. Mayra ran. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the bond's pull, away from the inevitability of him finding her, away from the questions that would destroy the fragile life she'd built. She made it to the edge of the forest before she heard the howl. It shook the trees, sent birds scattering into the night, and Mayra knew, bone deep, soul certain, that it was him. She stopped running. What was the point? He'd find her. He always would. The bond wouldn't let him stop. So she turned, waited, watched the shadows shift and move. And then he was there. Not in wolf form. Human. Striding out of the darkness like he owned it, his breath misting in the cold. His eyes locked on hers. Darian looked like hell. His hair was longer, unkempt, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his clothes travel-worn and muddy. But his eyes, those sharp, storm-gray eyes, were clearer than they'd been in the hall 2 months ago. Awake. Mayra. Her name was a rasp, a prayer, a curse. She stood frozen, one hand drifting to her belly without thinking. His gaze followed the movement, stopped. His entire body went still. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Mayra lifted her chin. Yes. It's mine. Yes. A sound escaped him, rough, broken, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He took a step forward, stopped, his hands clenched into fists. Why did you run? Why do you think? Mayra's voice cracked. You chose her, Darian. In front of the entire kingdom, I didn't. His voice was raw. I didn't choose anything. I was there. You saw what they wanted you to see. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, and Mayra's breath caught. Up close she could see the hollows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. I was poisoned, Mayra. Wolfsbane mixed with nightshade. Enough to cloud my mind, suppress my wolf, make me compliant. The word tasted like ash. Mayra stared at him. What? I don't remember most of the ceremony, just pieces. Seraphine's hand, the circlet, the crowd. And then you were gone, and the bond was screaming, and I couldn't. He broke off, jaw working. It took weeks to clear the poison, to get my wolf back, and the first thing I did was come after you. Why? The question hung between them. Darian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand settled on her cheek, warm despite the cold. Because you're mine, he said quietly. Because this... He gestured between them, at the bond neither could see but both could feel. This is real. Everything else is politics, lies, games I'm tired of playing. Mayra's throat burned. You're married. To a woman I don't love. A bond I didn't choose. A farce held together by poison and power plays. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I'll break it. I'll tear the whole damn system down if I have to. But I need to know, do you want me to? She should say no. Should tell him to leave, to go back to his throne and his queen and his perfect, predictable life. But she'd never been good at should. Yes, Mayra whispered. Relief crashed over his face. He pulled her close, careful of her belly, and pressed his forehead to hers. Then we fight, he murmured, together. They didn't get the chance. Mayra heard the horses before she saw them, hoofbeats pounding through snow, fast and deliberate. Darian heard them too. He pulled back, his hand dropping to the blade at his hip. How many? Mayra asked. 6. Maybe 8. Yours? His expression darkened. No. They came out of the trees like shadows, riders in dark cloaks, faces hidden, weapons drawn. Mayra's heart slammed into her throat. Assassins! Darian moved in front of her, blade already singing free of its sheath. Run! I'm not leaving you. Mayra! The first rider lunged. Darien met him with brutal efficiency, sword slicing through the man's guard and dropping him from his horse. The animal reared, screaming. Two more closed in. Darien spun, deflecting one strike, countering another. Blood sprayed across snow. Myra stumbled back, her mind racing. She wasn't a fighter. She was a healer. Her weapons were herbs and bandages and steady hands. But she wasn't helpless. She reached for the bond, not gently, not carefully. She grabbed it with both mental hands and pulled, flooding it with everything she had: fear, desperation, love, rage. Darien's wolf exploded to the surface. 1 second he was human. The next, he was a massive black wolf, twice the size of any natural animal, with eyes like molten silver and teeth that could crush bone. The assassins hesitated. It cost them. Darien tore through them like they were paper, claws rending, jaws snapping. He moved with a predator's grace, unstoppable and merciless. Myra watched, frozen, as he dismantled them one by one, until the last rider raised a crossbow, aimed at her. "No!" Darien lunged, but he was too far. The bolt flew. Myra felt it hit, not her body. The bond. She gasped, pain lancing through her chest, and collapsed. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Darien's wolf standing over her, blood dripping from his muzzle, his howl shaking the stars. She woke to firelight and rough bandages. Myra blinked, disoriented, her body aching in 100 places. She was in a cave, small, cold, safe. Easy. Darien's voice low and strained. He crouched beside her, human again, his hand on her shoulder. "Don't move yet." The baby, still there. I can hear the heartbeat. Relief crashed through her. She sagged back against the stone floor, breathing hard. "What happened?" "The bolt missed you. Hit a tree." Darien's jaw tightened. "But you collapsed." "The bond. Something broke when I shifted. I don't know what." Myra pressed a hand to her chest. The bond was still there, but fainter, fragile. "They were sent to kill me," she said quietly. "I know. Because I'm a threat." "Yes." Myra met his eyes. "Then we can't hide anymore." Darien's expression was grim. "No, we can't." "What do we do?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out, lacing his fingers through hers. "We go back," he said. "We take the fight to them. We expose the poison, the lies, all of it. They'll kill us." "Maybe." His grip tightened. "Or maybe we kill them first." Myra stared at him, this man she'd loved in secret, this king who'd been stolen from himself, this wolf who'd torn through enemies to protect her. And she thought about the child growing inside her, the bond that refused to break, the life she'd tried to build in the shadows. Screw the shadows. "All right," Myra said. "Let's burn it down." Darien smiled, sharp, feral, dangerous. "That's my queen." They didn't leave immediately. Myra needed rest. Her body had been through too much, the running, the stress, the bond's near break. Darien built up the fire, checked her bandages, and brought her water from a nearby stream. He was gentle, careful, nothing like the brutal wolf who'd shredded assassins an hour ago. "You're different," Myra said as he settled beside her. "Different how?" "Sharper. Like you've been sleeping for months and finally woke up." Darien nodded slowly. "That's what it felt like. The poison, it didn't just cloud my mind. It buried my wolf, made me compliant, easier to control." "Who did it?" "I don't know, but I have suspicions." "Seraphine? Maybe. Or her family. House Valter has been pushing for more influence in court for years. A royal marriage would give them exactly that." Myra frowned. "But you're the king. You could have refused." "Not if I didn't know I was being controlled." His voice turned bitter. "They played it perfectly. Slow doses over weeks. By the time I realized something was wrong, I was already standing at the altar." "And the bond?" "I felt it the whole time, screaming at me, trying to break through." He looked at her and something raw flickered in his eyes. "You kept me sane, Myra. Even when I couldn't reach you, I knew you were there. And when you ran, when the bond stretched thin, it was like someone tore a hole in my chest." Myra's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. You did what you had to. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I just wish I'd protected you better. You didn't know. I should have. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Mayera asked the question that had been eating at her since the forest. What happens when we go back? Darian's expression hardened. We gather proof. Find out who's behind the poison. Expose them publicly. And if they fight back? They will. Betsy, so we're walking into a war. Yes. Myra exhaled slowly. All right. Then we need allies. I have Lael, maybe a few others in the guard who aren't compromised. That's not enough. I know. Darian glanced at her. What are you thinking? Myra hesitated, then she pulled the silver pendant from beneath her shirt, the one he'd given her. It was simple, unadorned. But etched on the back was a symbol she'd seen before in Nan's old books. The mark of the moon healers. My mother's line, Myra said quietly. Before she died, she told me we were descended from healers who served the first kings. Powerful ones. Ones who could... She broke off, shaking her head. It sounds insane. Tell me. They could channel the bond, use it as a weapon. Darian went very still. What kind of weapon? I don't know. She died before she could teach me. Myra met his eyes. But when you shifted earlier, when I pulled on the bond, it felt like something unlocked, like a door I didn't know was there. Can you do it again? Maybe. If I had time to figure it out. Then we make time. Darian's voice turned fierce. Because if you can weaponize the bond, we've got a chance. Without it, we're dead. Yes? Myra nodded slowly. Then I guess I'd better learn fast. They stayed in the cave for 3 days. Darian hunted. Myra practiced. She started small, reaching for the bond, tugging on it, trying to understand its shape. It was like learning a new language. Every pull, every push, every flicker of energy felt different. Some attempts did nothing. Others left her gasping, drained. One made Darian's wolf surge to the surface so fast he nearly shifted in the middle of skinning a rabbit. Sorry, Myra panted. Darian, halfway between forms, just growled. But slowly, carefully, she began to understand. The bond wasn't just a connection. It was a channel, a conduit. And if she focused, if she pulled in just the right way, she could amplify his strength, sharpen his senses, even heal small injuries through the link. On the 3rd night, she managed something new. Darian had cut his hand on a jagged rock. Nothing serious, but it bled freely. Myra took his hand, pressed her palm to the wound, and reached for the bond. Light flared, soft, golden, warm. It poured from her into him, knitting skin, sealing flesh. Within seconds, the cut was gone. Darian stared at his hand, then at her. How did you do that? I don't know, Myra admitted. Her voice shook. I just felt it, like the bond wanted to heal you. Can you do it in a fight? I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. Myra's stomach twisted. You think they'll come for us again? I know they will. Darian's expression was grim. The assassins failed. Whoever sent them won't stop until we're dead. Then we move first. Agreed. They packed at dawn. Darian shifted into wolf form, and Myra climbed onto his back, clinging to his thick fur. He was massive, large enough to carry her easily, fast enough to outrun horses. They headed south, back toward the capital, back toward the lies and the poison and the throne that had been stolen. Back toward war. The bond hummed stronger the closer they got. Myra felt it like a compass, pulling them toward something she couldn't name. Darian felt it too. His wolf moved with purpose, cutting through forests and frozen rivers like he knew exactly where to go. On the 4th day, they reached the ruins. It was an old temple, half collapsed, overgrown with vines and moss. Myra slid off Darian's back as he shifted, both of them staring at the crumbling structure. I know this place, Darian said quietly. How? My father brought me here once when I was a boy. He stepped forward, running a hand over the stone. He said it was sacred, that the first kings were blessed here. Myra's pulse quickened. The moon healers served the first kings. Then maybe a voice cut through the silence. Well, well, look what crawled out of the wilderness. They spun. Commander Lyle stepped out from behind a broken pillar, flanked by 2 guards. His expression was unreadable. Darian's hand dropped to his blade. Lyle. Your Majesty. Lyle's tone was dry. You've been busy. Are you here to drag me back? That depends. Lyle's gaze flicked to Myra. Is she worth starting a civil war over? Darian's voice turned cold. Yes. Lyle studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed and waved the guards back. Good, because half the kingdom's ready to tear itself apart, and the other half's waiting to see whose side you're on. Myra's breath caught. What happened? Seraphine's family made their move. They've been consolidating power, replacing loyalists with their own people. The council's split, the military's fractured, and rumors are spreading that you, he pointed at Darian, abandoned your queen to chase after a peasant girl. Darian's jaw tightened. I was poisoned. I know, so do a handful of others, but we need proof. Something public, something undeniable. We'll get it. How? Myra stepped forward. The bond. Lyle frowned. What bond? Darian and Myra exchanged a glance. Then Darian said quietly, Show him. Myra hesitated. Then she reached for the bond, pulling gently. Light flared between them, soft, golden, unmistakable. It wrapped around Darian like a living thing, pulsing in time with their heartbeats. Lyle's eyes widened. What the hell is that? A true bond, Darian said. The kind that can't be faked, can't be broken, can't be poisoned away. And Seraphine? A political arrangement, nothing more. Lyle exhaled slowly. If that's real, if you can prove it in front of the council, they'll have no choice but to annul the marriage, Myra finished. Maybe. Or they'll kill you both and bury the truth. Lyle's expression was grim. House Valtor won't go down without a fight. Let them fight, Darian said. We're done hiding. Lyle looked between them, this broken king and this low-born healer with a bond that shouldn't exist. Then he smiled. All right, let's go start a war. The journey back to the capital took 6 days, and every single one of them felt like walking into a trap. Lyle led them through back roads and forgotten trails, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Valtor's spies would be watching. They traveled mostly at night, Darian in wolf form to cover more ground, Myra clinging to his back with her fingers buried in his fur. The 2 guards Lyle had brought, Cade and Race, both men Darian had known since his first command, rode ahead and behind, scanning for threats. They found 3. The first was a patrol of Valtor soldiers, 20 strong, camped at a river crossing. Lyle spotted them from a ridge and diverted the group east, adding half a day to their route. The second was a pair of trackers, hired men with wolf-born noses following their scent through the forest. Darian handled them quietly. Myra didn't ask what he'd done with the bodies. The third was worse. They were 2 days from the capital when the bond screamed. Myra gasped, nearly falling off Darian's back. He skidded to a halt, shifting mid-stride, catching her before she hit the ground. What's wrong? The bond. Myra pressed a hand to her chest, breathing hard. Something's pulling on it, hard. Darian's expression darkened. Seraphine. How would she? She's not stupid. If she knows about the bond, she'll try to use it against us. Lyle rode up beside them, frowning. Use it how? Bonds can be manipulated, Myra said, her voice strained. If you know what you're doing. My mother told me stories, healers who twisted bonds to control alphas, make them obedient. Like the poison, Darian said grimly. Worse. Poison clouds the mind. This would chain the wolf. Cade, the younger of the 2 guards, looked pale. Can they do that from a distance? If they have something of his, blood, hair, something tied to his essence. Darian's jaw tightened. The coronation. She put the circlet on my head herself. I bled during the binding ritual. Then she has it, Myra said. And if she's smart, she's already using it. Lyle swore under his breath. We need to move faster. Agreed. Darian glanced at Myra. Can you block it? I don't know. I can try. She closed her eyes, reaching for the bond. It was there, burning hot in her chest, but something else was there too. A foreign presence, cold and invasive, wrapping around the connection like thorns. Myra pushed back. The bond flared. Light erupted from her hands, bright enough to make the men flinch. Darian gasped, his wolf surging to the surface, eyes flashing silver, and then the presence retreated. Myra sagged, exhausted. That won't hold for long. It doesn't have to. Darian's voice was rough. We just need to get to the capital before she tries again. They rode hard after that. No more stops. No more caution. Just speed and desperation and the bond pulsing between them like a second heartbeat. By the time they reached the outer districts, Myra's body was screaming. Her back ached, her legs cramped. The baby kicked constantly, agitated by the stress, but she didn't complain, because the alternative was losing Darian to whatever Seraphine was planning. And that wasn't an option. But the capital looked different. Myra had only been here once before, the night of the ceremony, and even then she'd stayed in the shadows. But now, riding through the streets at dawn, she could see the changes. Valtor banners hung from windows, gold and crimson, the house colors, everywhere she looked. Soldiers in Valtor armor patrolled the market squares. And the people looked scared. What happened here? Myra asked quietly. Lyle's expression was grim. Seraphine's family moved fast. 2 weeks after the coronation, they started replacing the king's guard with their own men. Anyone who objected was reassigned or disappeared. And the council let this happen? Half the council's in Valtor's pocket. The other half's too terrified to speak up. He glanced at Darian. They think you abandoned them. Darian's hands tightened on the reins. I didn't abandon anyone. I know, but they don't. They entered the palace through a servant's entrance, avoiding the main gates where guards would recognize the king on sight. Lyle led them down narrow corridors and hidden staircases, places Myra suspected even Darian didn't know existed. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere safe, or as close to safe as we're going to get. They emerged into a small chamber buried deep in the palace's lower levels. It was sparse, just a table, a few chairs, and a single narrow window that let in weak morning light. Race shut the door behind them. We're clear, for now. Lyle gestured for them to sit. All right, let's talk strategy. Darian didn't sit. He paced instead, restless energy radiating off him in waves. We need to expose Seraphine, publicly, in front of the council. Agreed, but how? The bond. Darian stopped, looking at Myra. If we can demonstrate it, prove it's real. They'll call it witchcraft, Lyle interrupted. Or worse, you know how the council feels about magic. It's not magic. It's nature. Tell that to the men who burned healers 3 generations ago. Myra's stomach turned. She'd heard the stories. Healers accused of manipulating bonds, controlling alphas, using their gifts for power instead of service. Most of it had been lies, hysteria fueled by fear. But the burnings had been real. Then we don't call it magic, Myra said quietly. We call it what it is, a true bond, one that predates the political marriage Seraphine forced on you. Lyle frowned. That might work, if you can prove the marriage was coerced. The poison, Darian said. We test my blood. Show traces of wolfsbane and nightshade. It's been months. The poison's long gone. Then we find the source. Someone administered it. Someone prepared the doses. They'll have records, ingredients. Assuming they didn't destroy the evidence. They didn't. Cade spoke up for the first time, his voice uncertain. I might know where it is. Everyone turned to look at him. The young guard shifted uncomfortably. I've been watching the healer's quarters. Lady Seraphine visits there. A lot. More than a queen should. Why? Myra asked. I don't know, but one of the healers, old man named Corwin, he's been acting strange, nervous, like he's hiding something. Darian's eyes narrowed. You think he's the one who poisoned me? I think he knows who did. Silence fell over the room. Then Lyle said, We need to get to him, tonight, before Seraphine realizes we're here. Agreed. Darian looked at Myra. You should stay here. No. Myra, I'm a healer. If there's evidence in the healer's quarters, I'll know what to look for. You won't. He opened his mouth to argue, closed it, finally nodded. Fine, but you stay close to me, no exceptions. Deal. They waited until nightfall. Mayra spent the intervening hours trying to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. The baby kicked restlessly, sensing her anxiety. The bond pulsed in her chest, stronger now that they were close to the palace's heart, and somewhere, miles away, Seraphine was still pulling on it. Mayra could feel the foreign presence, faint but persistent, testing the edges of the connection. Every time it pushed, she pushed back. It was exhausting, like holding a door shut against someone who never stopped knocking. How long can you keep that up? Darian asked. They were alone in the chamber. Lyle and the guards had gone to gather supplies, leaving them a rare moment of privacy. I don't know, Mayra admitted. Days, maybe. A week, if I'm lucky. And if you can't? Then she'll take control of your wolf, and you'll do whatever she wants. Darian's jaw tightened. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. I do. He crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. Because even if she chains my wolf, she can't chain this. He pressed a hand to his chest, over his heart. You're in here, Mayra. You and our child. She can't touch that. Mayra's throat burned. You're putting a lot of faith in me. You've earned it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that love and willpower could overcome poison and politics and centuries of precedent. But she'd lived too long in the shadows to trust easy answers. What if I fail? She whispered. Then we fail together. Darian's hand found hers, lacing their fingers. But we don't stop fighting. The healer's quarters were on the palace's east wing, a sprawling complex of workrooms, storage chambers, and private offices. Mayra had been there once, years ago, when Nan had brought her to meet the capital's head healer. She remembered thinking it felt too clean, too ordered, nothing like the cluttered warmth of Nan's cottage. Now creeping through the corridors with Darian and Lyle, it felt like a tomb. They moved silently, avoiding patrols, sticking to servant passages. Kate had drawn them a rough map, marking Corwin's private office on the second floor. They reached it without incident. Darian tested the door. Locked. Lyle produced a set of picks. I'll have it open in... The door swung inward. Corwin stood on the other side, pale and hollow-eyed, a candle trembling in his hand. I've been expecting you, he said quietly. They sat in Corwin's office, a cramped, cluttered space filled with jars of herbs and stacks of medical texts. The old healer moved like a man already dead, his hands shaking as he poured them water. You poisoned the king, Lyle said. Not a question. Corwin nodded. Not directly. I prepared the doses. Someone else administered them. Who? Lady Seraphine's handmaid, a girl named Ilara. She's been dismissed, sent away the day after the coronation. He looked at Darian, guilt etched into every line of his face. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't want to, but they threatened my daughter, said they'd kill her if I refused. Where is she now? Mayra asked. Safe. I sent her to my brother's farm in the north, but His voice cracked. I've been living with this for months, watching you suffer, knowing what I'd done. Darian's expression was unreadable. Do you have proof? Corwin reached into his desk, pulling out a leather-bound journal. Everything's in here. Ingredients, dosages, dates. I kept records in case I needed to confess. He handed the journal to Darian. Mayra watched the king's face as he flipped through the pages, saw the moment recognition hit, the moment rage followed. This is enough, Darian said, his voice dangerously quiet. More than enough. What will you do? Corwin asked. Present it to the council. Tomorrow. They won't believe you. Lady Seraphine has too much influence. Then we'll make them believe. Darian stood, tucking the journal inside his coat. Thank you, Corwin, for your honesty and your courage. The old healer's eyes filled with tears. It won't bring back the months you lost. No, but it'll stop her from taking any more. They left him there, hunched over his desk, a broken man waiting for judgment. They made it halfway back to the safe chamber before the trap sprang. Soldiers poured into the corridor from both ends, 20, maybe 30, all in Voltor armor. Maera's heart slammed into her throat. Well, Lyell muttered, someone talked. Darian's hand dropped to his sword. Get behind me. Wait! A voice cut through the tension, smooth and cold. There's no need for violence. Seraphine stepped out from behind the soldiers. She looked like a portrait come to life. Golden hair perfectly coiffed, gown shimmering in the torchlight, crown glittering on her head. Beautiful. Untouchable. Maera hated her on sight. "Hello, husband," Seraphine said, her smile razor-sharp. "I've missed you." Darian's expression was ice. "I'm not your husband." The council would disagree. The council was lied to. "Prove it." Darian pulled out Corwin's journal, holding it up. "Gladly." Seraphine's smile didn't waver. "A journal? How quaint! Do you really think anyone will believe the ravings of a guilty old man over the word of their queen?" "They'll believe the truth. The truth is whatever I say it is." Her gaze slid to Maera, and something predatory flickered in her eyes. "And who's this? The peasant girl you've been chasing across the kingdom? How tragic." Maera stepped forward before Darian could stop her. "My name is Maera Lorne, and I'm carrying the king's child." Silence fell like a blade. Seraphine's smile froze. "Impossible." "Is it?" Maera's voice was steady, even though her hand shook. "You know about bonds, Seraphine. You've been pulling on ours for days, so you know it's real. A bond means nothing without a claim. Then let him claim it. Here, now, in front of witnesses." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "You think I'll just let that happen?" "I think you don't have a choice. I'm the queen." "You're a liar." Maera took another step forward. "And everyone in this corridor knows it." Seraphine's mask cracked. Rage flashed across her face, raw and ugly. "Kill them," she said. The soldiers hesitated. "I said kill them!" Lyell drew his sword. Darian shifted, his wolf exploding to the surface in a surge of fur and fury, and Maera reached for the bond. She didn't pull gently this time. She grabbed it with both hands and flooded it with everything she had. Love, desperation, power she didn't understand. Light erupted. Not soft, not golden. Blinding white, crackling with energy, pouring out of her like a broken dam. It hit Darian first. His wolf doubled in size, eyes blazing like molten silver, a roar tearing from his throat that shook the stones. Then it hit the soldiers. The ones closest to Maera stumbled back, shielding their eyes. The ones farther away dropped their weapons, gasping. And the bond. The bond sang. Maera felt it connecting them, amplifying Darian's strength, sharpening his senses. She felt his wolf recognizing her, claiming her, binding them together in a way that transcended words or ceremonies or politics. Seraphine screamed, "Stop her!" But no one moved, because standing in that corridor, backlit by light that shouldn't exist, Maera looked like exactly what she was, a force of nature. Darian's wolf moved like lightning. He tore through the Voltor soldiers with brutal efficiency, not killing. Maera felt him holding back through the bond, but incapacitating, breaking bones, shredding armor, sending men crashing into walls. Lyell fought beside him, his sword a blur, and Maera held the bond steady, feeding power into Darian, keeping him anchored even as the wolf raged. It was over in minutes. The corridor was littered with groaning soldiers. Seraphine stood alone, her perfect composure shattered, her crown askew. Darian shifted back to human, blood on his hands, his chest heaving. "It's done," he said quietly. Seraphine's laugh was bitter. "You think this changes anything? The council won't accept her. The kingdom won't accept her. You're throwing away everything for a nobody." "She's not a nobody." Darian's voice was steel. "She's my mate, my queen. And if the kingdom doesn't accept that, I'll burn the throne down myself." Seraphine stared at him, then at Maera. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "No," Maera said. "You will." They locked Seraphine in her chambers under heavy guard and called an emergency session of the council for dawn. Mayera spent the remaining hours in the safe chamber, shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. The bond had settled, but using it like that, channeling that much power, had drained her completely. Darian sat beside her, his hand on her belly, feeling their child kick. "That was reckless," he said quietly. "It worked. You could have hurt yourself, hurt the baby." "I know." Mayera covered his hand with hers. "But what else could I do? Let them kill us." "No, I just—" He broke off, jaw working. "I can't lose you, Mayera. Not now. Not after everything." "You won't." "You can't promise that." "Neither can you." She turned to face him. "But we can keep fighting, together, like you said." Darian pulled her close, careful of her belly, and pressed his forehead to hers. "Together," he murmured. The council chamber was packed. Every lord, every lady, every influential voice in the kingdom had been summoned. They filled the galleries, murmuring amongst themselves, eyes fixed on the empty throne at the room's head. Mayera stood in the center of the floor, Darian beside her, Lyle at her back. She'd traded her travel-worn clothes for a simple green dress, borrowed from a servant, but she still looked out of place among the silk and jewels surrounding her. She didn't care. The High Elder called the session to order, his voice echoing off marble walls. "We are gathered to address a matter of grave importance. Accusations have been made against Queen Seraphine of House Valtor. Accusations of treason, manipulation, and conspiracy against the crown." He looked at Darian. "Your Majesty, present your evidence." Darian stepped forward, holding up Corwin's journal. This journal documents a months-long poisoning campaign orchestrated by Lady Seraphine and her family. Wolfsbane and Nightshade, administered in carefully measured doses, designed to suppress my wolf and make me compliant. He opened the book, reading aloud. "Third week of autumn. Dosage increased. Subject shows greater pliability. Resistance to commands nearly non-existent. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The healer who prepared these poisons has confessed. He acted under duress, threatened with the death of his daughter if he refused." Darian's voice hardened. "Lady Seraphine used this poison to manipulate me into a marriage I did not choose, a bond I did not want." "Lies!" Seraphine's voice rang out. She stood in the gallery, flanked by her family's guards, her expression furious. "This is a fabrication, a desperate attempt to legitimize his affair with a peasant girl." "Her name is Mayera Lorne," Darian said coldly, "and she is my true mate. Prove it." Gladly, Darian turned to Mayera, holding out his hand. She took it, her heart pounding, and together they reached for the bond. Light flared between them, bright, undeniable, beautiful. It wrapped around them like living fire, pulsing in time with their heartbeats. The chamber fell silent. "This is a true bond," Darian said, his voice ringing clear. "Formed before Lady Seraphine entered my life. Hidden because Mayera had no name, no status, no way to claim it publicly. But it exists. It has always existed. And no poison, no political marriage, no amount of manipulation can break it." The council stared. Mayera felt their eyes on her, judging, measuring, doubting. She lifted her chin, refusing to shrink. "I am carrying the king's child," she said. "A child conceived before the coronation, before the false marriage, and I will not apologize for loving him." "She's lying," Seraphine spat. "The bond is fake, a trick, witchcraft." "Then test it," Lyle said, stepping forward. "Bonds can be verified. Any healer worth their title can confirm its authenticity." The High Elder frowned. "Is this true?" "Yes," Mayera said. "True bonds leave marks, energy signatures, things that can't be faked." "Then we will test it." The Elder gestured to the palace healers. "Examine them, now." Two healers approached, an older woman and a younger man, both looking nervous. They circled Mayera and Darian, hands glowing faintly as they probed the bond. The examination took minutes. It felt like hours. Finally, the older woman stepped back. "It's real," she said quietly. "A true bond. One of the strongest I've ever seen." The chamber erupted. Shouts, arguments, accusations flying from all sides. Seraphine's family demanding proof, loyalists demanding justice, everyone talking over everyone else. The High Elder slammed his staff against the floor. Order! We will have order! Silence fell, grudging and tense. The evidence is clear, the Elder said. The marriage between King Darien and Lady Seraphine was obtained through coercion and deceit. It is hereby annulled. Seraphine's face went white. Furthermore, the Elder continued, Lady Seraphine and House Valtor will stand trial for treason. The council will convene in 3 days to determine their fate. No. Seraphine's voice was a whisper, then a scream. No, this is not over. You think you've won, but you've just started a war. She lunged forward, and suddenly there was a blade in her hand, small, silver, gleaming. She threw it, not at Darien, at Maera. Everything slowed. Maera saw the blade spinning through the air, saw Darien moving, too far away to stop it, saw Lyle's eyes widen in horror, and she reached for the bond one last time. Light exploded from her hands, forming a shield, solid, shimmering, impossible. The blade hit it and shattered. Seraphine screamed, and Maera collapsed, the world going dark as the bond finally, mercifully, let her rest. She woke to voices arguing and the smell of antiseptic. Maera's eyes cracked open. White ceiling, stone walls. The palace infirmary. Her body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry, every muscle aching, her head pounding, her chest tight where the bond pulsed weakly. Reckless, and you know it. She could have died. That was Lyell. Angry. She didn't die. She saved herself. Darien. Exhausted. This time. What about next time? What happens when Valtor sends real assassins instead of a desperate woman with a dinner knife? Then I'll deal with it. You can't protect her from everything, Darien. You're one man. I'm the king. You're her mate. There's a difference. Maera tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her abdomen and she gasped, falling back against the pillows. Both men were at her side instantly. Don't move, Darien said, his hand on her shoulder. You've been out for 2 days. 2? Maera's throat was dry. The baby? Fine. Heartbeat strong. But you depleted yourself completely. The healer said, if you'd pushed any harder... He stopped, jaw tight. I didn't have a choice. I know. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. But Lyle's right. This can't keep happening. What do you want me to do? Stand there and let them kill me? No, I want you somewhere safe until this is over. Maera stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. Darien, Valtor's not going to stop. Seraphine's in chains, but her family's still out there. They have allies, resources. And now they know about you, about the bond, about the baby. His voice dropped. They'll come for you, Maera, hard and fast, and I can't watch you fight battles you're not trained for. I held my own in that corridor. You collapsed, after saving both our lives. Lyle cleared his throat. Maybe I should... Stay, Maera said sharply. Then to Darien, I'm not hiding while you clean up this mess. It's not hiding, it's being smart. It's being sidelined. It's being alive. Darien's control cracked. Do you understand what I felt through the bond when that blade came at you? Do you have any idea? He broke off, turning away. I can't lose you. I won't. Maera's anger deflated. She saw it now, the terror beneath his composure, the way his hand shook slightly when he thought she wasn't looking. I'm scared too, she said quietly, every second of every day, but running didn't work the first time, and it won't work now. Darien turned back to her. Then what do you suggest? I stop being a target and start being a weapon. Lael's eyebrows rose. Explain. Maera pushed herself up carefully, ignoring the protests from her body. The bond. I can use it. You saw what happened in the corridor. I channeled power through Darien, made him stronger, faster. If I can learn to control that, really control it, not just panic and throw light everywhere, we'd have an advantage Valtor can't counter. That kind of power takes training, Lyle said. Years of it. Then we don't have years. We improvise. Darien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, there might be a way. Both of them looked at him. The ruins where we met Lyell. My father told me stories about that place. He said the first moon healers trained there, learning to channel bonds without burning out. His gaze locked on Maera's. If the knowledge is still there, if we can find it, It's a gamble, Lael said. Everything's a gamble right now. Mayara's heart pounded. How long would it take? To get there? 2 days? To learn? I don't know. We don't have 2 days. The council meets tomorrow to decide Seraphine's fate. Valtor will move before then. Then we move first. Darian's expression hardened. Lyle, I need you to stall the council. Tell them I'm consulting with the healers about Mayara's condition. Buy us 3 days. And if they don't buy it, make them. Lyle muttered something under his breath but nodded. Fine. 3 days. But if you're not back by then, I'm coming after you. Deal. They left at nightfall, just the two of them. No guards. No fanfare. Darian shifted into wolf form and Mayara climbed onto his back, her body still weak but functional. The bond hummed between them, steadier now that she'd rested. As they slipped out of the palace through the same servants' entrance they'd used days before, Mayara caught sight of the council chamber through a window. Lights blazed inside, voices raised in argument. The kingdom was tearing itself apart, and she was running toward ancient ruins to learn magic she wasn't sure existed. Perfect. The journey was brutal. Mayara's body hadn't fully recovered. Every jolt, every sudden movement sent pain radiating through her abdomen. The baby kicked constantly, agitated by the stress and motion. But she didn't ask Darian to slow down, because behind them, barely an hour out from the capital, they heard horns. Hunters. How many? Mayara asked, her voice tight. Darian's growl rumbled through his chest. She felt his answer through the bond before he could shift to speak. 20. Maybe more. Valtors? Yes. Can we outrun them? For a while. He pushed harder, his massive paws eating up ground. But Mayara could feel the strain. He was strong, stronger than any normal wolf, but he was still flesh and blood. Eventually, he'd tire. They needed an advantage. Mayara closed her eyes, reaching for the bond. Not to channel power this time, just to understand it, feel its shape, its rhythm, the way it connected them. And she felt something else. A pull. Faint. Distant. Coming from the direction they were headed. Darian, she said. The ruins. I can feel them. He slowed slightly, questioning. Through the bond. There's something there. Something old. It's calling. His wolf hesitated. Then he changed direction slightly, angling toward the pull. The horns grew louder behind them. They reached the ruins just before dawn. Darian skidded to a halt, breathing hard, and Mayara slid off his back. He shifted immediately, swaying on his feet. How close are they? She asked. Minutes. His voice was rough. We need to move. The temple looked worse in daylight, more collapsed than she'd realized, stones overtaken by moss and vines. But the pull was stronger here, centered somewhere deep inside the structure. Mayara grabbed Darian's hand. This way. They ran through crumbling corridors, past broken statues and faded murals. The pull intensified with every step, until Mayara could barely think past it. It led them to a chamber buried beneath the main temple, a circular room with walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift in the torchlight Darian had lit. In the center stood a stone altar. On the altar lay a book. That's not possible, Darian breathed. This place has been abandoned for centuries. Mayara stepped forward, drawn by the pull. The book was ancient, leather cover cracked, pages yellowed, but it radiated energy. The same energy she felt in the bond. She reached for it. The moment her fingers touched the cover, light exploded. Not from her hands this time. From the book itself. It poured into her, through her, flooding every cell with information she didn't have words for. Images flashed through her mind. Women standing in circles, hands joined, light flowing between them. Wolves bowing to healers. Bonds forming, strengthening, becoming weapons and shields and bridges between souls. The first moon healers. Mayara gasped, staggering. Darian caught her. What did you see? Everything, she whispered. I saw everything. The knowledge settled into her bones like it had always been there, waiting. She understood now. The bond wasn't just a connection. It was a covenant, a partnership that required both parties to be whole, balanced, strong. And if one faltered, the other could carry them. She looked at Darian, really looked at him, and saw the bond for what it truly was. Unbreakable. Horns blared outside the temple. Darian's expression went cold. "They're here." "Good," Maera said. He blinked. "Good? I know what to do now." She picked up the book, tucking it into her cloak. "But I need you to trust me." "Maera it. Do you trust me?" He searched her face, then nodded. "With my life." "Then let's go show them what a real bond can do." They met the hunters in the temple's main courtyard. 23 men in Voltor armor, led by a scarred brute with dead eyes and a crossbow. They fanned out in a semicircle, weapons trained on Maera and Darian. "King Darian," the scarred man said, his voice flat. "Lady Maera, you're both under arrest for treason and conspiracy." "On whose authority?" Darian asked. "House Valtor, by order of Lord Casimir. Seraphine's father." Darian's hand drifted to his sword. "He has no authority over the crown." "He does now. The council voted this morning. You've been removed from power." Maera's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. Lyle was supposed to stall them." "Commander Lyle is dead, killed resisting arrest." "No." The words screamed through Maera's mind. Not Lyle, not the man who'd protected them, guided them, fought for them. Darian's face went blank. Not shocked, not grieving, just empty. And through the bond, Maera felt his rage building. "Stand down," she said quietly. Darian didn't move. "Darian, please." "They killed him," Darian said, his voice eerily calm. "They killed my friend, my brother. And you want me to stand down?" "I want you to let me handle this." He finally looked at her. "You can barely stand." "I know." Maera stepped in front of him, facing the hunters alone. "But I'm done running, done hiding, done letting other people fight my battles." "Maera, trust me." She reached for the bond, not gently, not carefully. She grabbed it with both hands and pulled, channeling everything the book had shown her, every technique, every lesson, every scrap of ancient knowledge. Light erupted, but this time it didn't just flow out of her. It flowed through the bond, into Darian, and then back into her, forming a circuit. A loop of power that fed on itself, growing stronger with every heartbeat. The hunters stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Maera felt the baby kick, one sharp jab, and suddenly the power doubled. The child. Their child. Adding its own strength to the bond. 3 souls. 1 connection. Unstoppable. "Fire!" the scarred man screamed. Crossbow bolts flew. Maera raised her hand and the light formed a shield. Solid, shimmering, perfect. The bolts hit it and disintegrated into ash. The hunters stared. "Last chance," Maera said, her voice echoing with power she didn't fully understand. "Leave now, or I'll make you leave." "Take them," the hunters charged. Maera didn't hesitate. She released the shield, and the power surged outward in a wave, not destructive, not violent, but overwhelming. It hit the hunters like a physical force, slamming them backward, pinning them to the ground. Not one of them could move. Maera walked forward slowly, the light following her like a living thing. "You came here to kill us," she said, "to silence the truth, to protect a lie." She stopped in front of the scarred man. "But you can't kill what you don't understand. And you don't understand this." She touched his forehead. Light flooded into him, not burning, not destroying, just showing. Showing him the bond, the truth, the love that held her and Darian together despite everything the world had thrown at them. The scarred man gasped. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out. I didn't know." "Now you do." Maera pulled her hand back. "Go home. Tell Casimir what you saw. Tell him if he comes for us again, I won't be this gentle." She released the power. The hunters scrambled to their feet, staring at her like she was something holy or terrifying. Maybe both. Then they ran. Maera watched them go, her body shaking with exhaustion. The light faded. The bond settled, and she collapsed. Darian caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." "Lyle Inki, I know." Maera's eyes burned. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault." "Then whose is it?" "Casimir's? Seraphine's. The whole damn system." Darian's jaw tightened. But they're going to pay. I swear it. Oh, they couldn't go back to the capital. Not yet. Not with Valtor controlling the council. Not with Darien officially removed from power. Not with every guard in the kingdom hunting them. So they went deeper into the wilderness. Darien carried Maera for hours, refusing to let her walk, until they found a cave near a frozen waterfall. It was small, cold, but defensible. He built a fire, brought her water, held her while she cried for Lael, for the life they'd lost, for the impossibility of what they were trying to do. "We can't win," Maera whispered. "They have the council, the army, everything. We have the bond. That's not enough. Then we'll make it enough." She pulled back to look at him. "How?" Darien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The outer territories. The border pacts. They've always been independent, resistant to the capital's control. If we can rally them, if we can show them what Valtor's done, they won't care. We're not their problem." "You're right, but a tyrant seizing the throne? That's everyone's problem." Maera's mind raced. "You're talking about a rebellion. I'm talking about a reckoning. You'll be starting a civil war." "They already started it. I'm just finishing it." The fire crackled between them. Outside, wind howled through the trees. Finally, Maera said, "All right, let's start a war." They spent 3 days in the cave, planning. Darien had contacts in the border territories, alphas who'd fought beside him in the old campaigns, packs who respected strength over politics. If they could reach them, convince them to stand against Valtor. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. Maera spent the time practicing with the bond. The book had given her knowledge, but knowledge and skill were different things. She needed control, precision, the ability to channel power without collapsing every time. Slowly, painfully, she learned how to pull without draining herself, how to amplify Darien's strength without overwhelming him, how to form shields that didn't shatter under pressure. And one afternoon, while Darien was hunting, she discovered something new. She reached for the bond, not to channel power, but just to feel him, to know he was safe. And suddenly she was seeing through his eyes. Forest, snow, a deer grazing 50 yards ahead. Maera gasped, breaking the connection. Her hands shook. She could see what he saw, feel what he felt. If she pushed harder, if she really tried, could she control him? The thought terrified her, but it also gave her an idea. When Darien returned with the deer, she told him what she'd discovered. He went very still. "You saw through my eyes?" "Yes. Just for a second. I didn't mean to. I was just reaching for you, and suddenly I was you." "That's not possible." "Neither is any of this." Maera gestured at the bond, at the power still humming faintly in the air around them. "But it's happening." Darien set the deer down, his expression troubled. "If you can see through my eyes, can you control me?" "I don't know. I didn't try." "Maybe you should." "What?" "If it works, if you can direct my wolf in battle, we'd be unstoppable. 2 minds, 1 body." "That's dangerous." "Everything we're doing is dangerous." Maera hesitated. "What if I hurt you?" "You won't." "You can't know that." "I know you." Darien took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Try, please. We need every advantage we can get." She wanted to refuse, wanted to say it was too risky, too invasive, too much like what Seraphine had tried to do, but he was right. They needed this. "All right," Maera said quietly, "but if it hurts, if you feel anything wrong, you tell me immediately." "Deal." They stood in the center of the cave, facing each other. Maera took a deep breath and reached for the bond. This time, she didn't just touch it, she dove in. The connection opened like a door, and suddenly she was drowning in sensation, Darien's heartbeat, his breathing, his wolf prowling just beneath the surface. Carefully, gently, she reached for the wolf. It snarled. Maera flinched but didn't pull back. Instead, she pushed calm through the bond. Trust. Partnership. The wolf's snarl faded. It circled, wary, testing her. Then slowly, it bowed its head. Permission granted. Maera gasped. Shift! Darian's body blurred, bones cracked, fur erupted. And she was still there, inside the bond, connected to his wolf. Walk forward, she whispered. The wolf walked. Turn left. It turned. Sit. It sat. Darian's consciousness was still there. She could feel him watching, aware but not controlling. He'd given her the reins completely. Myera's heart pounded. This was power beyond anything she'd imagined. The ability to command an alpha, to direct a wolf stronger than any normal creature. She could become exactly what the old stories warned about. A healer drunk on control. Carefully, she pulled back, releasing her grip on the wolf. Darian shifted back immediately, swaying. That was... He stopped, searching for words. Terrifying? Incredible. His eyes met hers. Do you realize what we just did? Crossed a line we can't uncross. Myra, I could feel it, Darian. The temptation. How easy it would be to just take over, make you do what I wanted. But you didn't. This time. You won't. His hands found her shoulders. Because that's not who you are. You're not Seraphine. You're not power-hungry or manipulative or cruel. You're... He stopped, his voice going soft. You're the woman who'd rather die than see me hurt, who ran into the wilderness pregnant and alone rather than risk my life, who stood in front of trained killers with nothing but faith in a bond you barely understood. Myra's throat burned. What if I'm not strong enough? You are. We are. He pulled her close. Together. Always together. All right. On the fourth day, they heard horses again. Not hunters this time. Scouts. Moving fast, heading south toward the border territories. Valtor's mobilizing, Darian said grimly. He knows we'll try to rally the packs. So we need to move faster. Agreed. They packed what little they had and headed deeper into the frontier. The terrain grew rougher, mountains giving way to frozen tundra, civilization falling away to wilderness. This was wolf country, territory where humans rarely ventured and alphas ruled by strength alone. Dangerous, unpredictable, perfect. They reached the first pack's territory at dusk. Darian shifted, letting out a howl that echoed across the frozen landscape. A challenge and a greeting combined. 3 wolves appeared on a ridge above them, big, scarred, eyes glowing in the twilight. Stay behind me, Darian murmured. But Myera stepped forward instead, ignoring his growl of protest. She reached for the bond, not to channel power, but to show it. Let the light pour out gentle and warm, illuminating the connection between her and Darian. The 3 wolves froze. One of them, the largest, with gray fur and a torn ear, shifted into human form. An older man, weathered and hard, with eyes that had seen too many winters. What in the frozen hells is that? He rasped. A true bond, Myera said. The kind your ancestors recognized, the kind House Valtor tried to destroy. The old alpha studied her. Then Darian. Then the light still shimmering between them. Darian Voss, he said finally. I heard you'd gone mad. Abandoned your throne for some peasant girl. Not abandoned. Stolen. By poison and lies. And this girl? Is my mate. My queen. The mother of my child. The old alpha's eyebrows rose. Bold claim. It's the truth. Truth doesn't mean much in the capital. It means everything out here. Darian's voice hardened. House Valtor seized the throne. They're hunting us. And when they're done with us, they'll come for you. For every independent pack that refuses to kneel. Let them try. They will. With armies, with laws, with chains forged from politics and power. Darian stepped forward. Or you can fight now, before they consolidate, before they become unstoppable. The old alpha was quiet for a long time. Then he said, What are you asking? Allegiance, warriors, a chance to take back what's mine. And if we refuse, then Valtor wins, and every wolf in this kingdom becomes a slave. Silence stretched across the frozen landscape. Finally, the old alpha threw back his head and laughed. Damn me, he said. I thought I'd die bored. All right, Voss, you've got your warriors. Let's go kill some tyrants. Word spread fast. Pack by pack, territory by territory, wolves answered the call. Some came for Darien, some came for the fight, and some, the ones who remembered the old stories, the old ways, came because they saw the bond between Maera and Darien and recognized it for what it was. Sacred. Within a week, they had 50 fighters. Within 2, 100. Not an army, but a start. They trained in the frozen wastes, learning to fight together, wolves and humans coordinating in ways that hadn't been seen in generations. And through it all, Maera worked with the healers among them, teaching what she'd learned, sharing the knowledge from the ancient book. Bonds could be strengthened, amplified, used to connect fighters in ways that transcended normal pack dynamics. She was creating something new, or something very, very old. On the 15th day, scouts brought news. Valtor was marching, 2,000 soldiers, 50 war wolves, heading straight for the border territories with orders to crush the rebellion before it could spread. They'd be here in 3 days. Darien called a war council. They gathered in a makeshift command tent, alphas from a dozen packs, warriors with decades of experience, and Maera, the only healer among them. "We can't win a straight fight," Darien said bluntly. "They outnumber us 20 to 1. "Then we don't fight straight," the old gray alpha, whose name was Roth, replied. "We fight dirty. Use the terrain. Hit them where they're weak. They're trained soldiers. They don't have weak points." "Everyone has weak points." Roth looked at Maera. "What about your bond magic?" "It's not magic. Whatever it is, can you use it on a battlefield?" Maera hesitated. She'd been practicing, growing stronger every day. But using the bond in small skirmishes was one thing. Using it in a full-scale battle. "I don't know," she admitted. "The power required to affect that many people. It might kill me." "Might?" "Probably would." Darien's face went white. "Then it's not an option." "It might be our only option," Maera said quietly. "No." "Darien, I said no." His voice cracked. "I'm not sacrificing you to win a battle. We'll find another way." "There might not be another way." "Then we lose." He stood, fury radiating off him. "I'd rather lose a kingdom than lose you." He walked out. Maera started to follow, but Roth caught her arm. "Let him cool down," the old alpha said. "He's terrified. Can't blame him." "We need a plan." "We have one. It just doesn't involve you dying." Roth's expression turned calculating. "But it does involve bait." The plan was insane. They'd split their forces, half hidden in the mountain passes, half visible on the open tundra. Valtor's army would see the smaller force and assume it was the entire rebellion. They'd attack, overconfident and spread thin, and the hidden fighters would hit them from behind. Classic ambush tactics. Except the bait force was going to get slaughtered. "I'll lead it," Darien said. "No," Maera said immediately. "They're coming for you specifically. If you're the bait, they'll throw everything at you." "That's the point. Then you'll die." "Maybe." His jaw was set. "But the kingdom needs you more than it needs me." "That's not true." "It is." Darien took her hands. "You're the one with the power, Maera. The connection to the old ways. The ability to unite bonds and wolves and healers. You're the king. I'm a fighter who inherited a crown." His voice went soft. "But you're something the kingdom's never seen, something it needs." "I need you," Maera whispered. "I know." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But sometimes need isn't enough." The baby kicked, hard enough to make Maera gasp. Darien's hand flew to her belly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just—" She broke off, staring at him. "Wait, I have an idea." "I don't like that look." "What if the bait wasn't you? What if it was me?" "Absolutely not. Listen, they want you dead because you're a threat to their power. But they want me dead because I'm proof of their lies." Maera's mind raced. "If I'm the bait, if I show myself openly, they'll come for me with everything. Forget strategy, forget caution. They'll just charge. Which makes it more dangerous. For me, but safer for everyone else." Darien's face was stricken. "You're pregnant." "I know. You can barely fight." "I don't need to fight. I just need to stand there and look vulnerable until the trap springs. Mayra, it's the right move, and you know it. He stared at her, torn between logic and emotion. Finally, he said, "No, find another way." "There isn't one." "Then we don't fight." "They'll hunt us down eventually." "Let them try." "Darian, please." "I already lost Lyell. I'm not losing you too." His voice broke. "I can't." Mayra cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You won't, because I'm going to survive this. We both are. And when it's over, we're going to raise our child in a kingdom that's free of poison and lies and people like Casimir. You can't promise that. Watch me." She kissed him, hard and desperate and full of all the words she couldn't say. When she pulled back, Darian's eyes were wet. "I hate this," he whispered. "Me too." "But you're right." "I know." He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. And through the bond, Mayra felt his fear, his love, his absolute conviction that he'd burn the world down to keep her safe. She just hoped she could keep him from having to. Valter's army arrived at dawn, 2,000 soldiers in perfect formation, marching across the frozen tundra like a dark tide. Werewolves prowled at their flanks, massive beasts bred for battle, twice the size of normal wolves. And at the front, riding a black warhorse, was Lord Casimir himself, Seraphine's father, the man behind the poison, the coup, the hunt. He looked exactly like his daughter, golden-haired, beautiful, cold. Mayra stood alone on a ridge overlooking the battlefield, deliberately visible. The wind whipped her cloak around her, and she pressed one hand to her swollen belly, the other to the bond. She could feel Darian hidden in the mountains behind her, his wolf prowling, desperate to protect her. "Not yet," she whispered through the bond. "Wait for my signal." His reluctant agreement pulsed back. Casimir's army spotted her. A horn blared, the soldiers shifted, weapons raised, and Casimir himself rode forward, stopping 50 yards from the ridge. "Mayra Lorne!" he called, his voice carrying across the snow. "The king's whore. I'm impressed you had the courage to show yourself." Mayra said nothing. "I'll make you an offer," Casimir continued. "Surrender now. Renounce your claim to the bond, and I'll let you live, you and your bastard child." "Generous," Mayra said flatly. "I thought so. What about Darian? The traitor dies. That's not negotiable." "Then neither is this." Mayra lifted her chin. "I'm not surrendering. I'm not renouncing anything. And if you want me, you'll have to come take me." Casimir smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." He raised his hand. The army charged. 2,000 soldiers and 50 werewolves, thundering across the tundra, focused entirely on the lone woman standing on the ridge. Exactly as planned. Mayra waited until they were halfway across the open ground. Then she reached for the bond. Not gently, not carefully. She grabbed it with everything she had and screamed one word through the connection. "Now!" The mountains exploded. Hidden fighters poured out from every pass, every crevice, every concealed position. 100 wolves and twice as many humans, hitting Valtor's army from behind and both sides. Chaos erupted. Casimir's perfect formation shattered. Soldiers spun, trying to defend against attacks from 3 directions at once. Werewolves turned on each other, confused by the sudden onslaught. And Darian's wolf was a force of nature. He tore through enemy lines like they were paper, coordinating the attack with precision Mayra had never seen. She fed power into him through the bond, amplifying his strength, his speed, his senses. 2 minds. 1 weapon. Unstoppable. But Casimir wasn't done. He rallied his personal guard. 50 elite soldiers trained specifically to kill wolves. They formed a wedge and drove straight for Mayra's ridge. She saw them coming, too fast, too coordinated, and she was alone. Mayra reached for the bond again, pulling desperately, trying to summon Darian, but he was too far away, too deep in the battle. The soldiers reached the ridge. Mayra threw up a shield. It held for 3 seconds, then shattered. A blade slashed across her arm. She cried out, stumbling back. Another soldier lunged, and then something massive hit him from the side. Roth, the old gray alpha. He'd shifted mid-leap, his wolf slamming into the soldiers with bone-crushing force. Run! He roared, but Maera didn't run. She dropped to her knees, pressed both hands to the frozen ground, and reached for every bond she could feel, not just hers and Darian's, but all of them. Every wolf on the battlefield, every connection between fighter and pack. And she pulled. Light erupted from the ground like a geyser. It poured into every allied wolf, amplifying their strength tenfold. Soldiers screamed, war wolves fled. The entire battlefield lit up like the sun had fallen to earth. Maera felt the power draining her, burning through her reserves, but she held on. Just a little longer. Just until a crossbow bolt hit her shoulder. Maera gasped, the connection breaking. She fell sideways, blood spreading across the snow. Casimir stood over her, reloading. Impressive, he said coldly, but not enough. He aimed at her heart, and Darian's wolf hit him like an avalanche. The impact sent Casimir flying. His crossbow skittered across the ice. Darian landed on top of him, jaws closing around his throat. One bite. That's all it would take. But Darian hesitated. Through the bond, Maera felt his struggle. The wolf wanted blood, vengeance, justice. But the man, the king, knew that killing Casimir like this would make them no better than him. Do it, Casimir spat. Prove you're the monster they say you are. Darian's wolf snarled, then shifted. Darian stood over Casimir in human form, bloodied but alive. You're not worth it. He turned toward Maera, and Casimir pulled a hidden knife. Darian! Maera screamed, but she was too far, too weak. The knife plunged toward Darian's back and stopped, held in place by nothing visible. Just light. The bond materialized into something solid, something real. Maera stared at her hands. She hadn't meant to do that. Hadn't even known she could. But the bond had protected him anyway. Darian spun, grabbed the knife, and slammed his fist into Casimir's jaw. The older man went down hard. It's over, Darian said. Around them, the battle was ending. Valter's soldiers were surrendering, their leaders dead or captured. The rebellion had won, but Maera barely noticed. Because the world was spinning, her vision darkening, blood still pouring from her shoulder. Darian, she whispered. He was at her side instantly. I've got you. Stay with me. The baby is fine. You're fine. You're going to be fine. But his voice was shaking, and through the bond, Maera felt his terror. She tried to speak, tried to tell him she loved him, that it was worth it, that they'd won, but darkness swallowed the words, and she fell. Maera woke to the smell of smoke and antiseptic, and something metallic she couldn't place. Her shoulder burned. Her entire body ached like she'd been trampled by horses. And the bond felt thin, stretched too far like a rope pulled to its breaking point. She tried to sit up, failed. Don't move. The voice was female, unfamiliar. Maera forced her eyes open and found herself staring at a canvas ceiling, a medical tent. Rough cots lined both sides, filled with wounded fighters groaning in pain. A woman leaned over her, middle-aged, dark-skinned, with healer's marks tattooed on her forearms. You lost a lot of blood, the woman said. The bolt went deep. Another inch and it would have hit your lung. The baby, still alive, heartbeat strong, but you need to rest. Where's Darian? The healer's expression tightened. Dealing with prisoners. He's been in and out checking on you every hour for 3 days. 3 days. Maera's stomach dropped. How bad was it? The battle? We won. Barely. Lost 43 fighters. Another 60 wounded. The healer gestured around the tent. This is what's left. Guilt twisted through Maera's chest. 43 dead. Because of her plan. Because she'd volunteered herself as bait and dragged everyone else into the carnage. Don't, the healer said sharply. I can see what you're thinking. Don't do that to yourself. Those fighters chose to be here, chose to fight for something bigger than survival. They chose to die. They chose to live free. There's a difference. The woman stood, checking the bandage on Maera's shoulder. I'm Kiva. I run the healing corps for Roth's pack. And before you ask, yes, I know who you are. The whole camp knows. What do they know? That you're the healer who can weaponize bonds, who stood alone against an army and lived, who's carrying the king's child and refuses to hide. Kiva's expression softened slightly. They're calling you the Storm Queen. Thought you should know. Maera's throat tightened. I'm not a queen. Tell that to the 100 fighters outside who watched you channel enough power to light up the entire battlefield. Kiva finished with the bandage. Rest. You're going to need your strength for what's coming. What's coming? The reckoning, son. Darien came 2 hours later. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, clothes still stained with blood. But he was alive. Whole. The bond pulsed between them, stronger now that they were close. He dropped to his knees beside her cot, taking her hand carefully like she might shatter. You're awake. How long have you been up? Maera asked. Doesn't matter. Darien, you almost died. His voice cracked. On that ridge. I felt it through this bond. Felt you slipping away. And I wasn't fast enough. I'm here. We're both here. Barely. He pressed his forehead to her hand. I can't keep doing this. Watching you throw yourself into danger, it's killing me. Then stop watching and start trusting. He looked up at her. What? You keep trying to protect me. Keep me safe. Keep me out of the fighting. Maera's voice was gentle but firm. But I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I'm your partner. You're equal. And if we're going to win this war, you need to stop seeing me as something to shield and start seeing me as a weapon. You're not a weapon. I am. We both are. She squeezed his hand. Together. Like we've always been. Darien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Casimir's talking. The subject change was abrupt. Maera let it slide. What's he saying? Everything. The poison, the coup, how they plan to consolidate power once I was removed. Darien's expression darkened. Seraphine's still in a cell back at the Capitol. He wants her freed as part of a deal. What kind of deal? Exile for both of them. In exchange for a full confession and the names of everyone involved in the conspiracy. Maera frowned. That's too easy. He's hiding something. I know, but the information he's offering, it could dismantle Valter's entire network. Every corrupt counselor, every bought guard, every noble who helped them, at the cost of letting them walk away. Yes. Don't take it. Darien blinked. Why not? Because men like Casimir don't confess unless they have an escape plan. And exile means they'll be alive, plotting, waiting for another chance to strike. Maera struggled to sit up, ignoring Kiva's sharp look from across the tent. You need to make an example of them. Show the kingdom what happens when you try to steal the throne through poison and lies. You're talking about executions. I'm talking about justice. The council won't support it. Half of them are still Valtor sympathizers. Then bypass the council. Darien stared at her. That's exactly what Casimir did. No, Casimir seized power through deception. You'd be taking it back through strength. Maera met his eyes. The outer packs follow you now. You have an army. Use it. You want me to march on the Capitol. I want you to reclaim what's yours. Silence fell between them. Outside the tent, voices rose and fell. Fighters training, healers working, the camp settling into an uneasy rhythm. Finally, Darien said, If I do this, if I take the Capitol by force, there's no going back. It'll be seen as a military coup. Let it be seen that way. You can change the narrative once you're in power. And if I can't, then we build something new, something better than what came before. Darien's jaw tightened. You're asking me to start a civil war. I'm asking you to finish one. The War Council convened at dusk. Roth was there, along with 24 other Alpha leaders from the border packs. They crowded into the command tent, a larger structure erected at the camp's center, and stood in a loose circle around the strategy table. Darien had insisted Maera attend despite Kiva's protests. She sat in a chair Roth had brought, her shoulders still bandaged, but her mind sharp. Casimir's offering a deal, Darien began without preamble. Full confession. Names of co-conspirators. In exchange for exile. Exile? One of the younger Alphas, a woman named Senna with scars across her throat, spat on the ground. Let him run with his tail between his legs after what he did? The information he's offering could cripple Valtor's network permanently, Darien said. Or it could be lies, Roth countered, designed to make us waste time chasing ghosts while his real allies regroup. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the tent. What does the healer think? Senna asked, nodding at Mayera. All eyes turned to her. Mayera took a slow breath. I think Casimir's a coward who'll say anything to save his own skin. And I think exiling him sends a message to every ambitious lord in the kingdom that you can commit treason and walk away with your life. So you'd have us execute him, another alpha said. I'd have you make him face the consequences of his choices, publicly, in front of the entire kingdom. Mayera's voice was steady. Show them what happens when you poison a king and try to steal a throne. The council is compromised, Mayera interrupted. Half of them are Valtor allies. The other half are too scared to act. If you wait for their approval, you'll be waiting forever. Then what do you suggest? Roth asked. March on the capital, take back the palace, call a new council, one filled with people who aren't bought and paid for. Silence. Then Senna laughed. I like her. She's got teeth. It's a bold plan, Roth said slowly. But bold doesn't mean smart. We've got maybe 200 fighters. The capital has 3 times that in city guards alone. The guards follow whoever's in power, Darien said. If we can remove Valtor's puppet counselors fast enough, the guards will stand down. And if they don't? Then we fight. More silence. Heavier this time. Finally, an older alpha with gray streaking his beard spoke up. I didn't come here to install you as a dictator, Voss. I came because Valtor needed to be stopped. But this, marching on the capital, removing the council by force, it's the same thing they did to you. No, Mayera said quietly. It's not. The gray-bearded alpha looked at her. Explain. Casimir seized power through poison and lies. He manipulated Darien's mind, stole his choice, and forced a false bond. Mayera gestured to the light still faintly visible between her and Darien. This is real, chosen, built on trust and partnership. What we're proposing isn't a coup, it's a restoration. The people won't see the difference. Then we make them see it. Mayera's voice grew stronger. We show them the bond. Prove it's real. Demonstrate what Valtor tried to destroy. And we give them something Casimir never did. Transparency. Truth. A king who rules with his mate instead of above his people. The tent was silent. Then Roth started to laugh, deep and rough and genuine. Storm Queen, he said, shaking his head. The name fits. All right, I'm in. Let's go take a capital. One by one, the other alphas agreed. Some reluctantly, some eagerly, but they all agreed. They'd march at dawn. Mayera spent the night preparing. Kiva changed her bandages and gave her a bitter tea that dulled the pain enough to move. The baby kicked constantly, agitated by Mayera's stress, by the energy still crackling through the bond. You should stay here, Kiva said as she worked. Rest. Let the fighters handle this. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Mayera met the older woman's eyes. They need to see me, see the bond. If I'm not there, if it's just Darien claiming his throne, it'll look like exactly what that gray-bearded alpha said. A military coup. And if you're there, it looks like what? True love conquers all? It looks like proof, Mayera said, that what we're fighting for is real. Kiva tied off the last bandage with more force than necessary. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. Or maybe I'll change a kingdom. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Mayera almost smiled. I know. They left at first light. 200 fighters, wolves and humans both, moving in a loose column through terrain that grew less wild with every mile. Darien led in wolf form, Mayera riding beside him on a borrowed horse. The bond hummed between them, steady and strong. They reached the capital's outer districts by midday. News of their approach had spread. People lined the streets, not cheering, not jeering, just watching, silent and wary and waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Mayera felt their eyes on her, saw mothers pulling children closer, Saw merchants closing shop windows. Saw guards gripping weapons tighter. Fear. That's what she saw. Fear of change, of war, of the unknown. Darian shifted, falling back to walk beside her horse. "They're terrified," he said quietly. "So are we," Mayera replied. "The difference is we're doing something about it." They reached the palace gates an hour later. A line of city guards blocked the entrance, 50 men in armor, weapons drawn. Behind them, palace walls loomed, crowned with Valtor banners. The lead guard, a captain with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. "King Darian," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "by order of the council, you are to surrender yourself and disband your forces." "By order of which council?" Darian asked. "The legitimate one I appointed? Or the puppet government Casimir installed after poisoning me?" The captain's jaw tightened. "I have my orders. I'm giving you new ones. Stand aside. Let us pass. No blood needs to be shed today." "I can't do that." "You can. You're choosing not to." Silence stretched across the courtyard. The guards shifted nervously. The rebel fighters behind Darian growled low in their throats. Then Mayera guided her horse forward. "Captain," she said, "do you have a family?" He blinked, surprised. "What? A family? Wife? Children? Parents?" Yes, a wife. 2 daughters. "And you love them?" "Of course." "Then you understand why I'm here." Mayera's hand drifted to her belly. "I'm carrying the king's child. A child conceived before Casimir poisoned him and forced a false marriage. A child whose father was stolen by lies and political games." The captain's expression flickered, uncertainty crossing his features. "I know you're just following orders," Mayera continued, "but those orders come from men who poisoned your king, who seized power through deception, who would have killed me and this child to hide their crimes." She paused. "So I'm asking you, as a father, as a man who understands what it means to protect the ones you love, stand aside. Let us reclaim what's ours. And when this is over, you can tell your daughters you chose truth over tyranny." Silence. The captain stared at her, then at Darian, then at the bond still faintly glowing between them. Finally, he lowered his sword. "Stand down," he said to his men. "Let them pass." The guards parted like water. Darian's fighters surged forward, flooding through the gates. Mayera rode beside the king, her heart pounding, hardly believing it had worked. Behind them, the captain called out, "For what it's worth, Your Majesty, I'm glad you're back." Darian nodded once. Then they were through, into the palace courtyard, and there was no turning back. The palace was chaos. Servants fled in every direction. Minor nobles barricaded themselves in chambers. And somewhere deep inside, the false council was scrambling to mount a defense. Darian's fighters spread through the corridors, securing key positions. Roth led a team to the dungeons to free any prisoners Valtor had taken. Senna and her wolves headed for the guard barracks to ensure no organized resistance could form. And Darian, with Mayera at his side and a dozen fighters at their backs, marched straight for the throne room. They found it occupied. 12 counselors sat in a semicircle, flanked by Valtor house guards. At the center, in a chair that was almost but not quite a throne, sat a man Mayera didn't recognize. Middle-aged, soft around the middle, with calculating eyes. "Lord Brennus," Darian said coldly. "I shouldn't be surprised. You always did know which way to lean when power shifted." Brennus smiled thinly. "King Darian, or should I say, former King Darian, the council voted to remove you from power after you abandoned your duties. I was poisoned and imprisoned by the woman you helped crown. A convenient story, but without proof. We have proof." Darian pulled Corwin's journal from his coat, tossing it onto the floor between them. Detailed records of every dose, every ingredient, every moment of manipulation. Signed confessions from the healer who prepared the poison and the lord who ordered it. Brennus didn't even glance at the journal. Paper can be forged. Can this be forged? Mayera stepped forward and light erupted from her hands. The bond flared to life. Brilliant, undeniable, wrapping around her and Darian like living fire. It filled the throne room, casting shadows that danced across marble walls. Several counselors gasped. One actually stood, backing away. "This is a true bond," Mayera said, her voice echoing with power. Formed months before Seraphine entered our lives. Hidden, because I had no status, no name, no way to claim it publicly. But it exists. It has always existed, and no amount of political maneuvering can erase it. Witchcraft, Brennus spat. Nature, Darian corrected. The same force that's governed wolves since the first packs formed. You know the law, Brennus. True bonds supersede political marriages. That law was written centuries ago, and it's never been overturned, which means my marriage to Seraphine is void. My bond with Maera takes precedence, and every decision you've made in my absence is illegitimate. Brennus's mask cracked. Rage flashed across his face. You think you can just walk in here and undo months of work? We've rebuilt the council, restored order, created stability. You've created a dictatorship, Maera said, with yourselves at the top and everyone else scrambling for scraps. Better a strong council than a weak king who abandons his throne for a peasant whore. Darian moved so fast, Maera barely saw it. One moment he was beside her. The next he had Brennus by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Insult her again, Darian said quietly, and I'll rip your tongue out. Brennus choked, clawing at Darian's hand. Your Majesty. One of the other counselors, a younger man with nervous eyes, stood. Please. Lord Brennus spoke out of turn, but he's not wrong about the instability. The kingdom's been in turmoil since you left. People are scared, uncertain. If you return to power now, it could spark riots, even civil war. It's already a civil war, Darian said, releasing Brennus. The older man crumpled, gasping. Casimir started it when he poisoned me. We're just finishing it. By force? If necessary. Then you're no better than he is. Wrong. Maera stepped forward again. Casimir ruled through fear and deception. We're offering transparency. Truth. A partnership between king and people, not a dictator holding power by force. How? The young counselor asked. How do you prove that's not just pretty words? Maera looked at Darian. He nodded. We disband this council, Maera said. Immediately. We call for new elections, open to anyone, not just nobles. We let the people choose their representatives. Shocked silence. Then Brennus laughed, harsh and bitter. You'd give power to commoners? To peasants who don't understand governance? I'd give it to people who actually live with the consequences of your decisions, Maera shot back. People who've been taxed into poverty while you feast in marble halls. People who've sent their children to fight in wars you started. People like me. You're one woman, Brennus sneered. You think the masses will rally behind some low-born healer just because she spread her legs for the king? This time it was Maera who moved. She crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and slapped him, hard. The crack echoed through the throne room. I'm the woman who survived assassination attempts, carried a king's child through the wilderness, and stood alone against an army, Maera said, her voice deadly quiet. I'm the woman who weaponized a bond you thought was myth and turned the tide of a battle you thought was won. And I'm the woman who's going to dismantle everything you've built. She turned to face the other counselors. You have a choice. Support us. Support real reform, real representation, and keep your positions. Or stand with Brennus and face treason charges for your role in the coup. You can't prove we were involved, one of them protested. Casimir already gave us the names, Darian said. Every counselor who took Valtor gold. Every noble who helped orchestrate the poisoning. You're all on the list. Lies. But effective ones. The counselors looked at each other. Fear and calculation warred on their faces. Finally, the young counselor who'd spoken earlier said, What guarantees do we have? That you won't just execute us once you're in power? None, Darian said bluntly. Except my word. And the fact that killing you would make me exactly what you think I am, a tyrant. I want to rebuild this kingdom, not rule it through terror. The young man studied him, then Maera, then the bond still glowing faintly between them. All right, he said. I'm in. One by one, 7 more counselors agreed, some quickly, some reluctantly, but they agreed. The remaining 4, including Brennus, refused. Take them to the dungeons, Darian said. They'll stand trial once this is settled. Guards moved forward. Brennus fought, screaming about legitimacy and law and tyranny, but it didn't matter. He was dragged away. and Darien stood before the throne, the seat he'd been born to, stolen from, fought to reclaim. He didn't sit. Instead, he turned to Maera and held out his hand. "Together," he said. Maera took it. Together. The next 3 days were a blur. They worked constantly, meeting with remaining counselors, drafting new laws, sending messengers to every territory announcing the change in power. Darien refused to be crowned again until proper elections could be held, until the people had a voice. It was radical, unprecedented, and half the nobles thought it would end in disaster. But the common people loved it. Word spread fast. The king who'd been poisoned had returned. The healer who'd fought beside him was carrying his child, and together they were dismantling the old corrupt system. Petitions flooded the palace, requests for audiences, questions about the new elections. People wanted details, wanted to believe, and slowly, carefully, Maera and Darien gave them reasons to. On the 4th day, they held a public assembly in the palace courtyard. Thousands came, packed shoulder to shoulder, craning to see the dais where Maera and Darien stood. Darien spoke first. About the poisoning, the false marriage, the coup. He held nothing back, showed them Corwin's journal, read excerpts aloud, made the conspiracy undeniable. Anger rippled through the crowd, shouts for justice, for blood. Then Maera stepped forward. "I understand your rage," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I felt it too. When they tried to kill me, when they hunted me through the wilderness, when they sent armies to silence us." She paused. "But rage alone won't rebuild a kingdom. Neither will revenge." The crowd quieted slightly. "What will rebuild it," Maera continued, "is truth, transparency, and the courage to try something new." She gestured to Darien. "The king is offering you a choice, not orders, not demands, a choice. To participate in your own governance, to elect representatives who actually listen, to be part of something bigger than any one person's ambition." She pressed a hand to her belly. "I'm carrying a child who will inherit this kingdom one day, and I want them to inherit something worth protecting, not a throne built on lies and fear, but a system built on trust and partnership." Her voice grew stronger. "So I'm asking you, not as a healer, not as the king's mate, but as someone who's lived the same struggles you have, help us. Stand with us. Build this together." Silence fell. Then someone in the back started clapping. It spread, slowly at first, then faster, until the entire courtyard erupted in applause. Tears burned Maera's eyes. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope, but standing there with Darien's hand in hers and thousands of voices raised in support, she felt something shift. Not victory, not yet, but the beginning of it. That night, they finally had a moment alone. Maera sat in the private chambers Darien had reclaimed, his old rooms untouched since the coup. The bed was too soft after weeks of sleeping on the ground, the silence too loud after constant noise and movement. Darien emerged from the washroom, hair still damp, wearing clean clothes for the first time in days. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired, sore, terrified we're going to screw this up." He sat beside her, pulling her against his chest carefully. "We won't." "You can't know that." "I know we'll try. That's all anyone can do." Maera closed her eyes, breathing in his scent, felt the bond settle between them, no longer screaming, no longer stretched thin, just there, steady and strong. "Lael would have loved this," she said quietly. Darien's arms tightened around her. "Yeah, he would have. Do you think he'd be proud of what we're doing? I think he'd call us insane." "Then he'd roll up his sleeves and help anyway." Darien's voice cracked slightly. "He always did." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then the baby kicked, hard enough to make Darien jump. "Was that—" "Yeah." Maera guided his hand to her belly. "They've been active all day. I think all the excitement is affecting them." Darien's expression softened. "Them?" "Kiva thinks it might be twins. She heard 2 heartbeats during the last exam." "Twins?" Darien's voice was awed. "2 of them? Terrifying, right?" "Terrifying," he agreed. Then he smiled, real and genuine and full of something that looked like hope. And perfect. Mayera leaned into him, letting exhaustion finally catch up. Outside, the city was settling. The revolution was just beginning. And somewhere in the dungeons, Casimir and Seraphine and the remnants of Valtor's conspiracy waited for judgment. But for now, for this one moment, Mayera let herself rest, let herself believe they might actually win. The trial was set for a week later. Public, transparent, broadcast across the kingdom so everyone could see justice being served. Casimir stood in chains before a new council, one composed of the 7 who'd turned plus 5 temporary members chosen by lot from the common people: a blacksmith, a farmer, a merchant, a teacher, a former soldier. People who'd never held power before. People who had everything to gain from getting this right. Darien presided, but he didn't judge. That fell to the council, and a jury selected the same way, common people chosen at random, given the facts, asked to decide. It took 3 days of testimony, of evidence, of witnesses. Corwin spoke, described the poison he'd made, the threats against his daughter. Servants testified about seeing Seraphine's handmaid administering doses to Darien's food. Border Pack alphas described the battles they'd fought, the fighters they'd lost. And Mayera told them everything, about the bond, the pregnancy, the hunt through the wilderness, the assassins, the choice to become bait, the moment she'd channeled power she didn't understand to save the man she loved. She held nothing back. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Then the jury deliberated. It took 2 hours. They returned with a verdict: guilty, on all charges: treason, conspiracy, murder by proxy. The sentence: death. Casimir didn't scream or beg. He just stood there, face pale, as guards led him away. Seraphine wasn't so composed. She fought, screamed that this was political theater, that Mayera had bewitched Darien, that the bond was fake. No one listened. They were executed at dawn 3 days later, publicly, in the same courtyard where Mayera had addressed the people. Mayera didn't attend, couldn't stomach it, even knowing it was necessary. But Darien did. Stood witness as the man who'd poisoned him and the woman who'd helped face the consequences. When it was over, he returned to their chambers and held Mayera for an hour without speaking. Finally, he said, "It's done." "Is it?" Mayera asked. "The conspiracy's broken. Valtor's network is being dismantled. Elections are scheduled." He pulled back to look at her. "We won, Mayera. We actually won." "Then why doesn't it feel like it?" "Because winning was the easy part. Rebuilding is going to be hell." Mayera almost laughed. "You call that easy?" "Compared to what comes next, yes." He wasn't wrong. The elections took months to organize. They had to establish districts, create ballots, educate people on the process. Some regions embraced it immediately, others resisted, clinging to the old noble-dominated system. But slowly, painfully, it happened. And when the first elected council convened, Mayera stood in the gallery and watched. A blacksmith, a teacher, a healer, a farmer, a merchant, a former guard. And yes, some nobles, but ones chosen by their people, not by birthright. It wasn't perfect, far from it. But it was a start. Darien was formally recrowned 2 weeks later, not in secret, not through political maneuvering, through public ceremony with representatives from every territory present. And this time, when he took the throne, Mayera stood beside him. Not as queen yet. That would come later, after the birth, after the bond was formally recognized. But as partner, as mate, as the woman who'd helped him reclaim what was stolen. The High Elder, the same one who'd presided over the false marriage, performed the ceremony. "King Darien Voss," he intoned, "do you swear to rule with justice, transparency, and partnership?" "I do." "And do you recognize Mayera Lorne as your true mate, bound by nature and choice?" "I do." The elder turned to Mayera. "Mayera Lorne, do you accept this bond, this partnership, this responsibility?" Mayera's hand found Darien's. The bond flared between them, warm and bright and unbreakable. "I do," she said. Light erupted. Not violent, not overwhelming, just present. Filling the throne room, spilling into the corridors, touching everyone present with the certainty of what they'd just witnessed. A true bond. Recognized, claimed, unbreakable. The crowd erupted, and Maera, low-born, nameless, invisible, stood beside the king as his equal. Storm Queen, they called her. She was starting to believe it. At that. 4 months later, she gave birth. The labor was brutal. 20 hours of pain and fear and Kiva barking orders, while Darien paced outside the door like a caged wolf. But when it was over, when Maera held 2 tiny, squalling infants in her arms, everything else faded. A boy and a girl, twins, just as Kiva had predicted. They had Darien's dark hair and Maera's gray eyes. And when Darien finally entered the room, when he saw them for the first time, he dropped to his knees beside the bed and wept. "They're perfect," he whispered. "They're ours," Maera corrected. Proof of what they'd survived, what they'd fought for, what they'd built together. Outside, the kingdom was changing. Elections were being held. Old systems were being dismantled. New ones were rising in their place. It wasn't easy. It wasn't smooth. But it was happening. And as Maera looked down at her children, these tiny, fragile lives that represented everything they'd fought for, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real. Solid. Unshakable. The bond hummed between her and Darien, steady and strong. Together, they'd survived the impossible. Together, they'd changed a kingdom. And together, with their children, their people, their hard-won partnership, they'd build something better, something worth the fight. The twins were 3 weeks old when the first real threat emerged. Not war, not conspiracy. Something worse. Drought. It started in the southern territories, crops withering, wells running dry, livestock dying. Within weeks, it spread north. Rivers that should have been swollen with spring melt ran shallow and sluggish. Fields that should have been green turned brown and brittle. People were scared, angry, looking for someone to blame, and some of them blamed the new council. Maera heard the whispers in the palace corridors, servants gossiping when they thought she couldn't hear, guards muttering over dice games, even counselors exchanging worried glances during meetings. The old ways were better. At least nobles knew how to manage resources. This new system is failing. Darien tried to shield her from it, but she wasn't stupid. She saw the tension in his shoulders during council sessions, heard the edge in his voice when he snapped at advisors who suggested reverting to the old power structure. The kingdom they'd fought so hard to rebuild was fracturing, and they had 3 weeks to fix it before people started starving. "We need to redirect water from the northern reservoirs," one counselor said. His name was Gareth, the former soldier chosen in the first elections. "Channel it south through the old aqueducts." "Those aqueducts haven't been maintained in decades," another countered. Mira, the teacher. "They'll collapse under the pressure." "Then we repair them." "With what resources? Half our labor force is already trying to dig new wells. So we pull workers from other projects. And leave those projects unfinished? We're already behind on infrastructure repairs from the war." The argument spiraled, voices rising, tensions crackling. Maera sat at the table's end, one hand absently rocking the cradle beside her where the twins slept. She'd insisted on bringing them to the meeting despite protests. They were too young to be separated from her for hours. And besides, she wanted the council to remember what they were fighting for. These children. This future. Darien sat at the table's head, jaw tight, listening to the circular arguments with barely concealed frustration. Finally, he held up a hand. "Enough! We're not solving this by shouting." "Then what do you suggest, Your Majesty?" Gareth asked. Not quite respectful, not quite insubordinate. "I suggest we stop treating this like a political problem and start treating it like a survival problem." Darien's gaze swept the table. "The drought doesn't care about our new system or the old one. It doesn't care about elections or power structures. It just is, so we adapt." "How?" Mira asked. "Water rationing, immediately. Redirect what we have to essential crops. Halt all non-critical construction projects and move those workers to well digging and aqueduct repair." He looked at the merchant counselor, a woman named Isla. "Can we import grain from the coastal territories?" "At triple the normal price. They know we're desperate." "Pay it. That'll drain the treasury. Then we drain it. People can't eat gold. Silence fell over the table. Then Mayera spoke up. What about the old temple? Everyone turned to look at her. The ruins, she clarified, where Darian and I found the moon healer texts. My mother told me stories about healers who could... She hesitated. It sounded insane, even in her own head. Who could call water, make it rain? That's myth, Gareth said flatly. So was weaponizing bonds, until I did it. Myra met his eyes. I'm not saying I can make it rain, but the texts mentioned rituals, techniques the old healers used to work with nature, not against it. Maybe there's something there we can use. It's worth investigating, Darian said. At this point, we'll try anything. You want to send a team to some crumbling ruin to chase fairy tales while people are dying? Gareth's voice rose. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The old council would never... The old council poisoned the king and seized power through lies. Mayera interrupted, her voice sharp. So forgive me if I don't give a damn what they would have done. Gareth's face flushed. I'm just saying, you're saying you want to give up. Revert to the old ways because they're comfortable, familiar. Mayra stood, careful not to wake the twins. But those ways failed too. They just failed slowly, quietly, in ways that only hurt people like me. People without names or titles or power. She walked to the window, looking out over the city. The drought is showing us something, that the old systems and the new ones both have flaws, that neither is perfect. But at least with the new system, we're all failing together. And maybe, just maybe, we can fix it together too. She turned back to the council. So yes, I'm going to that temple. I'm going to search those texts. And if there's even a chance I can help, I'm taking it. You just gave birth, Mira protested. You should be resting. I'll rest when people stop dying of thirst. Darian stood. Then I'm coming with you. No. Myra's voice was firm. You're needed here. Managing the rationing, coordinating the well crews, keeping the council from tearing itself apart. She softened slightly. I'll take Kiva. And a few guards. We'll be fine. Myra, trust me. The words hung between them, an echo of every impossible thing they'd survived. Finally, Darian nodded. 3 days. If you haven't found anything by then, you come back. Deal. They left at dawn. Mayera, Kiva, and 6 guards, including Race, who'd survived the battle against Valter's army and refused to let the Storm Queen travel without proper protection. The twins stayed behind with a wet nurse Kiva had personally vetted. Myra hated leaving them, hated the physical ache in her chest as she rode away from the palace. But the bond with Darian stayed strong, and through it she could feel him watching over their children. It would have to be enough. The journey to the ruins took 2 days. The landscape grew more desolate with every mile, fields cracked and barren, streams reduced to muddy trickles, trees drooping under the relentless sun. People watched them pass with hollow eyes. Some recognized Mayera. Most just saw another noble riding past their suffering. It made her sick. We're failing them, she said quietly to Kiva as they made camp the first night. You're trying, Kiva replied. That's more than most rulers do. Oh, trying isn't enough. It's all you've got. The older healer poked at the fire. The drought isn't your fault, girl. Nature does what it wants. Maybe, but people are suffering because our systems, old and new, can't handle it. That is our fault. Kiva was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Your mother would be proud of you. You know that, right? Mayera's throat tightened. You knew her. Met her once, long time ago. She came through our territory helping with an outbreak of fever. Saved half the pack. Kiva smiled faintly. She had the same stubborn look you get when you're determined to do the impossible. Did it work? The impossible thing she was trying to do? Most of the time, not always. Kiva's expression grew serious, but she never stopped trying, even when it cost her. Myra thought about that as she lay down to sleep, about her mother, about the moon healers, about the impossible task she'd set herself, and she wondered if she was walking the same path, one that ended in sacrifice. The temple looked worse than she remembered, more collapsed, more overgrown, like the land itself was trying to reclaim what humans had abandoned. They descended into the underground chamber where Mayera had found the book. It was still there, resting on the stone altar, covered in dust. Mayra picked it up carefully. The bond hummed in her chest, fainter without Darien close, but still present. "What are we looking for?" Kiva asked. "Anything about water, rain, drought?" Mayra flipped through pages, squinting at the faded text. Most of it was about bonds, how to form them, strengthen them, use them in healing. But near the back, she found something different, a section titled Covenant with the Land. The text was dense, written in old dialect that made her head hurt. But the images were clear. Healers standing in circles, hands joined, light flowing between them and into the earth. "They're channeling the bond," Mayra breathed, "not into people, into the land itself." Kiva leaned over her shoulder. "That's not possible. Neither is anything else we've done." Mayra kept reading. The ritual required multiple healers, a true bond as the anchor, and something called a sacrifice of essence. She didn't like the sound of that. "What does it mean?" Race asked from the doorway. "I'm not sure." Mayra read further. "It says the bond must be opened completely, made vulnerable, exposed to the elements." Her stomach twisted. "It's talking about using the bond as a conduit, channeling energy from one source to another, but the cost—" She stopped. The cost was high, potentially fatal. The text didn't sugarcoat it. The healer who opens themselves thus may not survive. The bond will protect what it can, but nature demands balance. Life for life. Energy for energy. "Absolutely not," Kiva said, reading over her shoulder. "You're not doing this. It might be the only way. It'll kill you. It might not. And if it does? What then? Those twins grow up without a mother? Darien loses his mate? The kingdom loses the one person holding the new council together?" Kiva's voice was fierce. "No, find another way." Mayra stared at the text, at the images of healers sacrificing themselves for their people. Then she closed the book. "You're right," she said quietly. "There has to be another way." But in her heart, she wasn't sure there was. They returned to the capital 3 days later with the book and no solutions. The drought had worsened. 2 villages in the south had been abandoned, people migrating north looking for water. Fights were breaking out at wells. The city guard was stretched thin, keeping order. Darien met Mayra in their chambers, exhaustion written in every line of his body. "Anything?" he asked. "Maybe, but it's complicated." She told him about the ritual, the sacrifice, the cost. His face went white. "No, I said the same thing. Then why are you telling me?" "Because we might not have a choice." Mayra's voice was steady, even though her hands shook. "People are dying, Darien. Children are dying, and if this could save them—" "Not at the cost of your life." "You don't know it'll cost that." "Yes, I do." His voice cracked. "The bond is connected to both of us. If you burn yourself out channeling it, I'll feel every second, and then I'll die too. Because there's no version of this world where I survive losing you." Mayra's eyes burned. "So what do we do?" "We find another way." "There isn't one." "Then we make one." They stood in silence, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them. Finally, Mayra said, "What if we don't do it alone?" Darien frowned. "What?" "The ritual requires multiple healers, a network of bonds to share the load." Her mind raced. "We've been thinking too small. One healer, one sacrifice. But what if we spread it out? Multiple people channeling smaller amounts of energy." "It could work," Darien said slowly. "If you had enough people." "I do. Every healer in the kingdom who's willing, every person with even a trace of the old bloodlines." Mayra's voice grew stronger. "We create a network, link them through the bond, use our connection as the anchor, but distribute the cost. That's never been done before. Neither has anything else we've tried." Darien pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Through the bond, she felt his fear, his desperation, his absolute unwillingness to lose her. "If this goes wrong," he started, "it won't." "You can't know that." "No, but I can try. We can try. Together." He kissed her. hard and desperate and full of everything words couldn't capture. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. Together. Always. They put out the call the next day. Healers from across the kingdom. Anyone with moon healer blood. Anyone willing to risk themselves for the chance to break the drought. Myra expected maybe 20 responses. She got 200. They came from everywhere. Cities, villages, border territories. Some were trained healers. Some were farmers with latent abilities they'd never explored. Some were just desperate people willing to try anything. Kiva organized them, setting up training sessions in the palace courtyard, teaching them the basics of bond manipulation, energy channeling, the techniques Myra had learned from the ancient texts. It was chaos, beautiful, terrifying chaos. And through it all, Myra felt the network forming, connections sparking between people who'd never met, bonds of purpose, if not blood, linking them together. On the 7th day, they were ready. The ritual took place at dawn. 200 healers stood in concentric circles in the palace courtyard. Myra and Darian at the center, the twins with Kiva at the edge, protected but present. The bond between Myra and Darian blazed like a sun. "Are you sure about this?" Darian asked one last time. "No," Myra admitted, "but we're doing it anyway." She raised her hands. The healers mirrored her, and together they reached for the bond. Light erupted, not violent, not overwhelming, just vast, spreading from Myra and Darian outward through the network, touching every person in the circle, linking them into something greater than themselves. Myra felt it flowing through her, not draining, sharing, each person contributing a small amount of energy, the collective effort far greater than any individual sacrifice. She directed it downward, into the earth, into the cracked, thirsty soil that hadn't seen rain in months. The ground trembled, people gasped, and deep below, Myra felt something respond. Not magic, not divinity, just nature. The fundamental forces that governed water and growth and life. They were dormant, disrupted by drought, but not dead. She spoke to them through the bond, not with words, with intention, with energy, with the combined will of 200 people begging the land to live again. And slowly, impossibly, the land answered. Clouds gathered, dark and heavy and pregnant with rain. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the first drops began to fall. Small at first, then harder, then a downpour that drenched the courtyard, soaked the circles of healers, turned the dry earth to mud. People screamed, laughed, cried. The rain fell and fell and fell. Myra held the connection as long as she could, channeling energy through the network, keeping the rain coming. Her body shook with exhaustion, her vision blurred, but she didn't let go, not until she felt Darian's hands on her shoulders. "It's enough," he said gently. "You did it. Let go." Myra released the bond. The network collapsed. Light faded. She sagged and Darian caught her. But the rain didn't stop. It kept falling, natural now, no longer forced. Just rain. Real, life-giving, impossible rain. The courtyard erupted in celebration. Healers hugging each other, guards cheering. Even the stoic counselors watching from the palace balconies looked stunned. Myra let Darian hold her, too exhausted to stand, too overwhelmed to process what they'd just done. "You broke a drought," Darian whispered. "You actually broke a drought." "We did," Myra corrected. "All of us." She looked around at the healers, common people, farmers, servants, nobles, all soaked and laughing and united by what they'd accomplished. This was the kingdom she'd wanted to build. Not perfect, not easy, but together. The rain lasted 3 days, long enough to fill wells, revive crops, restore rivers, long enough to break the back of the drought and give people hope. The southern territories rejoiced. Migration stopped. Families returned to their villages, and everywhere Myra went, people bowed. Not in subservience, in respect. The Storm Queen had earned her name, but victory came with complications. The old noble houses saw what had happened, saw the power and unity, in common people working together, and they were terrified. Some doubled down on resistance to the new council. Others quietly started forming alliances, trying to consolidate power before the reform stripped them of influence entirely. And in the capital, tensions within the council itself began to show. Gareth, the former soldier, started pushing for military expansion, arguing that strength would keep the kingdom stable. Mira, the teacher, wanted resources funneled into education, said knowledge was the real foundation. Isla, the merchant, focused on trade agreements and economic growth. Each had valid points, each was absolutely certain their way was right, and none of them would compromise. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Darian said one night, pacing their chambers. "The old system was corrupt, but at least it was unified. This," he gestured vaguely, "this is chaos." "Chaos is how change looks," Mayera replied. She was nursing the twins, one at each breast, both making contented sounds. "Give it time." "We might not have time. If the council can't agree on basic resource allocation, how are they going to handle real crises?" "The same way we did, by arguing until someone finds a solution everyone can live with." "That's not governance, that's anarchy." "Maybe." Mayera looked up at him. "Or maybe it's democracy. Messy and loud and frustrating, but real." Darian stopped pacing, stared at her, then laughed, rough and genuine. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make impossible things sound reasonable." "Practice," she smiled. "And stubbornness. Lots of stubbornness." He sat beside her, watching the twins nurse. His hand found hers. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly, "that we've started something we can't control, that it'll tear the kingdom apart." "It might," Mayera said honestly, "but it also might build something better." "We won't know unless we try. And if we fail, then we fail trying. That's more than most people can say." The crisis came 6 weeks later. One of the southern territories, a region still dominated by old noble families, declared independence. They refused to participate in the elections, refused to recognize the new council, claimed the king had no authority to impose democracy on lands governed by centuries of tradition. It was a direct challenge, one that couldn't be ignored. The council convened an emergency session. "We send the army," Gareth said immediately. "Crush the rebellion before it spreads." "And prove their point?" Mira shot back. "That we're just another tyranny forcing our will on unwilling people?" "So we let them go?" Isla demanded. "Set a precedent that any territory can just leave whenever they disagree with policy?" "Maybe they should be able to," Mayera said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "What?" Gareth's voice was flat. "Maybe territories should have the right to govern themselves, to choose their own systems." Mayera stood, the twins sleeping in a double sling across her chest. "We fought for choice, for the right to determine our own futures. Why shouldn't they have the same?" "Because it'll destroy the kingdom," Gareth said, "or it'll create something new, a confederation, allied territories with shared defense and trade, but independent governance." "That's insane." "So was breaking a drought." Mayera's voice was steady. "So was weaponizing bonds. So was giving common people a voice in government. Everything we've done has been insane, but it's worked." Silence fell over the chamber. Then Darian spoke. "What if we negotiate?" "With rebels?" Gareth looked incredulous. "With people exercising the same rights we claimed for ourselves." Darian's gaze swept the council. "We go to them, not with an army, with a proposal. They can keep their traditional governance if they want, but they remain part of the kingdom for defense and trade, and they participate in a larger council, one that handles issues affecting all territories." "They'll never agree," Isla said. "Then we've lost nothing by trying. But if they do agree, if we can show that democracy and tradition can coexist, we'll have proven something revolutionary." More silence. Then Mira said, "I vote we try." One by one, the other counselors agreed, even Gareth, though he looked like it pained him. "All right," Darian said, we negotiate." He looked at Mayera. "You're coming with me." "Obviously." They traveled south with a small delegation. No army, no weapons. Just Darian, Mayera, 3 counselors, and enough guards to avoid being completely stupid. The rebel territory's leader met them at the border. Lord Valen, an older man with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too many compromises. "King Darian," he said, not quite respectful. You're braver than I expected, or more foolish. Neither. Just tired of fighting. Darian dismounted. We're here to talk. About what? Surrender? About coexistence. Valen's eyebrows rose. Explain. They talked for 3 hours. Darian presented the proposal. Independent governance, shared defense, representation in a larger council. Valen countered with concerns about autonomy, about traditions being eroded, about losing identity to a homogenized system. Mayra listened, watched, waited for the right moment. Then she spoke. My mother was a healer with no name, she said quietly. My father, I never knew him. I grew up invisible, powerless, watching nobles make decisions that destroyed lives without ever facing consequences. Valen's expression flickered, uncertainty crossing his features. The old system failed people like me, Mayra continued, but it worked for people like you, people with land, titles, traditions worth protecting. I understand why you're afraid of losing that. Do you? Valen's voice was sharp. Yes, because I'm afraid too. Afraid that everything we've built will collapse, that democracy will turn into mob rule, that we'll trade one broken system for another. She paused. But I'm more afraid of not trying, of letting fear keep us trapped in patterns that only work for some of us. What are you proposing? A hybrid. Keep your traditional governance, your nobles, your hierarchies, your customs, but send representatives to the larger council. Participate in decisions that affect everyone. And in exchange, you get protection, trade access, and the freedom to reject any mandate that threatens your core identity. Valen studied her. And if we abuse that freedom, use it to oppress our own people, then we intervene, not with armies, with consequences. Trade sanctions, diplomatic pressure. And if that fails, yes, military action, but only as a last resort. You're asking us to trust you. I'm asking you to trust the system, the checks and balances. The idea that power distributed is power controlled. Mayra's voice grew stronger. I'm asking you to take a leap of faith, the same one I took when I walked out of the wilderness pregnant and powerless and demanded to be heard. Valen was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'll bring your proposal to my council. We'll vote on it. That's all we ask, Darian said. They shook hands. Not friends, not quite allies, but not enemies either. It was a start. The vote took a week. Valen's council debated, argued, fought over every detail. In the end, they agreed, barely, by a margin of 2 votes. But they agreed. The rebel territory would rejoin the kingdom, with conditions, with protections, but together. News spread fast. Other territories considering secession reconsidered. Some still left, 3 in total, forming their own alliance. But most stayed, emboldened by the compromise. The kingdom didn't shatter. It evolved. Borders became more fluid. Power more distributed. The capital's authority lessened, but in exchange, cooperation increased. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. 1 year after the twins were born, Mayra was formally crowned queen. The ceremony was nothing like Seraphine's coronation. No pomp, no excessive displays of wealth. Just a simple gathering in the palace courtyard, open to anyone who wanted to attend. Thousands came. Common people. Nobles, healers, warriors. Representatives from every territory, traditional and democratic alike. The High Elder performed the ceremony, his voice carrying across the crowd. Mayra Lorne, he said, you have walked through fire, survived betrayal, war, and impossible odds. You have weaponized bonds, broken droughts, and rebuilt a kingdom from its foundations. Do you swear to continue this work? To rule with compassion, strength, and partnership? Mayra looked at Darian, at their children, now walking, babbling, full of energy and chaos, at the people gathered before her. I do, she said. The crown was simple. No jewels, just polished silver engraved with symbols from the Moon Healer texts. Darian placed it on her head himself, and the bond between them flared, brilliant and warm and unbreakable. The crowd erupted. Not just applause, celebration, joy, relief, the kind that comes from surviving something terrible and finding hope on the other side. Maera stood beside Darien, her hand in his, and looked out over the kingdom they'd fought for. It wasn't the kingdom she'd imagined as a child. Wasn't the fairy tale ending poets wrote about. It was messy, complicated, full of people who disagreed, territories that resisted, systems that still needed fixing. But it was real, and it was theirs. 5 years passed. The twins, Kael and Lyra, grew wild and fierce. Kael had his father's wolf, already shifting at 4 years old. Lyra showed signs of healing abilities, drawing light from her hands when she concentrated. The kingdom continued evolving. Elections became routine. Councils learned to compromise. The hybrid system of democracy and tradition settled into an uneasy but functional balance. There were still problems, still conflicts. Still, moments when Maera wondered if they'd bitten off more than they could chew, but they kept going. One night, Maera found Darien on the palace balcony, staring out over the city. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking." "About?" "How we got here. Everything that had to happen, good and terrible, to reach this moment." He turned to her. "Do you ever regret it? The path we chose?" Maera thought about the wilderness, the assassins, the battles, the impossible choices, the sacrifices. "No," she said. "I regret the pain, the people we lost, but the choices? Never. Even knowing what it cost? Especially knowing what it cost." She leaned against him. "Because look what we built." Below them, the city was alive. Markets bustling, children playing, people going about their lives, free to choose, free to speak, free to exist without fear. Imperfect. Complicated. But free. "We did that," Maera said softly. "You and me. Two people who should have been crushed by the system. Instead, we broke it, built something better." "You built it," Darien corrected. "I just fought beside you." "No, we built it. Together. Always together." The bond hummed between them. Steady. Unbreakable. Proof of what two people could accomplish when they refused to accept impossible. Behind them, they heard small footsteps. Kael and Lyra appeared, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Can't sleep," Lyra mumbled. "Bad dreams," Kael added. Darien scooped them both up, settling them on the balcony railing with Maera's help. "Want to know a secret?" Maera asked. The twins nodded. "Your father and I had bad dreams too, terrible ones, about monsters and poison and battles we thought we'd lose." "But you won," Kael said. "We survived," Maera corrected, "and we built something worth surviving for, something we're going to pass on to you." "What?" Lyra asked. "A kingdom where you get to choose, where your voices matter, where being born without a name doesn't mean living without power." Maera's voice was gentle but firm. "It's not perfect. You're going to have to fight to keep it, to improve it, to make it better than we did." "That's a lot of responsibility," Kael said solemnly. "It is, but you won't carry it alone." Darien's hand found Maera's. "You'll have each other, and the bond, and the knowledge that impossible things become possible when you refuse to give up." The twins considered this. Then Lyra said, "Tell us the story again, about how Mama became the Storm Queen." Maera smiled. "All right, but then you sleep. Deal?" "Deal." She told them the story, not the sanitized version, the real one, with fear and pain and moments where everything could have ended differently. She told them about the bond that saved them, about the choice to fight instead of hide, about learning that power came not from birthright, but from courage, compassion, and the willingness to try impossible things. When she finished, both twins were asleep. Darien carried them back to their beds, and Maera followed, watching him tuck them in with the same fierce gentleness he'd shown her in the wilderness. "They're going to be amazing," she whispered. "They already are," Darien replied. "Because they're ours." Years later, when Maera was old and her hair had turned silver, when Darien's wolf moved slower but no less sure, when their children had children of their own, people still told the story. About the healer with no name who became a queen, about the king who chose love over politics, about the bond that couldn't be broken, the drought that was ended, the kingdom that was rebuilt from ashes. Some details got exaggerated, some smoothed over. That's how stories work. But the core remained true. Two people, impossible odds, a choice to fight instead of surrender, and a kingdom changed forever. Myra didn't live to see all the changes her revolution sparked, didn't see the neighboring kingdoms adopt similar systems, or the old noble houses finally fade into history, or the moon healer traditions fully restored. But she saw enough. Saw her children grow strong and wise, saw the kingdom stable and thriving, saw people living free. On her last day, Darian sat beside her bed, holding her hand. The bond was still there, faint now, worn thin by decades of use, but unbroken. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied. Every impossible minute of it. Myra smiled, closed her eyes, and let go. The bond flickered, held, then gently, peacefully, faded. But its echo remained, in the systems they'd built, in the children they'd raised, in the kingdom that bore the marks of two people who refused to accept that change was impossible. From abandoned to force of nature, from invisible to unforgettable, from nothing to everything. The Storm Queen's legacy lived on, and the kingdom she'd helped forge, messy, imperfect, but free, thrived in her wake.